On digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM.
The Two Mics on Talk Sport.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics, and it's time to say a very, very good morning to Mr. Mike Parry. You okay, Mr. Parry?
Well, it would be a better morning if you didn't introduce the show with a sneering, mocking reference to the fact that I'm a former rugby correspondent.
I don't think that was a sneering reference at all.
Yes, it was.
I thought it was paying very, very good kind of respectful...
Oh, no. You're trying to say to our audience of millions that, let's all laugh behind our hand because Mike Parry's a rugby correspondent.
Former Rugby World Cup correspondent.
I don't do it anymore.
Why don't you do it anymore?
Well, because I've got time. I won't be commentating or commenting or following necessarily... at first close hand the fortunes of England in this particular tournament,
but you will
because I have other responsibilities.
Yeah, but you will be flying the flag, presumably, and you do know a little bit about rugby, so all I'm saying is...
I know a little bit. Now, what does that mean?
Well,
another sneering, minimal comment.
You know a little bit about rugby. It's my kind of understated way of complimenting you, actually. I'm saying that, your predictions might end up being the best predictions of the whole tournament, actually.
I see. Because
I don't want to big you up too much and say you are the best expert that we have. You may be the best expert on this show that we have, and we've got like a fantasy Rugby World Cup league that we'll be talking about a little bit later on. We've got predictions for the Premier League as well. We've got loads and loads of stuff to do.
But less of this sneering innuendos, please.
Well, I don't think it was sneering.
Because that can only lead to problems.
Yes.
And the problem it might end up for you is you might need cranial surgery. So I'm just warning you, okay?
Are you once again turning to what can only be described as a violent response to a problem?
No. I said that affectionately, like you affectionately called me a rugby correspondent.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well, I don't think calling you a rugby correspondent is an insult.
Yeah. But, the way you said it is. The way you said.
I'll apologise for that.
If I said, "Oh, my," everybody knows you're a bit of a food gourmet.
I would take that as a compliment.
I.e., one kebab from another.
I would take that as a compliment.
You take it as a compliment.
I would say thank you very much.
Well,
indeed.
I'll tell you something. It's not meant as a compliment.
Is it not?
No, it's meant to indicate that you're a fat slob who stuffs food in your face on a regular basis.
That's very disappointing.
And you're not too bothered what sort of food it is, as long as it's voluminous.
Very, very disappointing. We've got loads to talk about because apart from the Rugby World Cup, we've got the Europa League from last night to talk about.
Have you seen what Harry said about that?
Yeah, I have seen that.
Harry Redknapp.
He says that the Europa League is basically a waste of time.
Well, he says what I've been saying for years.
Except for when Everton were in it, of course.
No, I even said it when Everton were in it. I've said that if your team gets involved in having to go to far-flung corners of Eastern Europe on a Thursday, don't get home until 6 o'clock Friday morning, then you've got to give the boys the day off. Then you've got to get them back in on...
Celtic went to Holland, didn't they?
Yeah.
And Liverpool went to France.
Yes.
So it wasn't that bad.
No, but later on in the tournament, they go to places further away. Actually, Celtic did very well, didn't they?
They did.
2-2 draw.
They did.
Are Ajax top of the Dutch league at the moment?
I'm not sure if
I think they are.
I think they are.
I think they're storming the league. So Celtic took the lead. They were pulled back and they came away with a credible draw.
Down to 10 men.
Down to 10 men on 74 minutes. I mean, that's a very credible performance and one that old Ronnie needed, wasn't it?
It certainly was. Because people were starting to say this guy is on very, very shaky ground.
If you can't win the Scottish Premier League in a league of one...
Well, it's not this year.
Well, this is the point.
Aberdeen are up there, aren't they?
This is the point. He's allowed, discipline to slacken, to come away, to trickle away, to come off. And now... Aberdeen are the team in Scotland.
But Aberdeen have done terribly well. Surely you should give them some credit.
But it's
not just because Celtic have fallen away.
No, with the resources that Celtic have, they should even
now
the point.
Be
4 or 5 points ahead at the top of the SPL.
But they haven't got the resources. They haven't got anything like the resources.
Apart from anything else, they've got crowds which are 4 times the average crowd in the Scottish Premier League. No, they're not, sorry. They're 6 times the average crowd in the Scottish Premier League.
Yeah.
Just that revenue money alone going through the gates, never mind TV deals and all that, gives them the advantage to employ players who are of higher quality than anything Aberdeen can afford.
Yeah, but they can't afford to pay the players anything like what they get paid even in the Championship. People leave teams in Scotland and come and play in the Championship.
Yes, I know more money. I know that, but they've still got more money in Aberdeen. And also, of course, Aberdeen is about to go into a massive recession because of the oil industry, is it not?
Well, that's what you say.
Well, I'm telling you. I mean, if the price of oil has halved over the last 18 months, do you not think that there might be a bit of a problem, considering Aberdeen is known as Oil City?
It is being driven very much by oil, but the Aberdeen fans have been filling their stadium. It might only be 22,000, but they've been filling their stadium, so there's no shortage of money and shortage of fans to go and support the team.
Yes, but that's only half the number of people who go into Celtic Park every time Celtic play.
No, I get that.
By the way, who said Aberdeen was called Oil City?
I don't know. Who did?
I don't know, because it's a granite city. It's always been known as the granite city.
Well, is it the granite city or the oil city?
It's the granite city, but its recent wealth over the last 50 years has been based on oil.
Yes, it has.
Right?
It has.
So if the price of oil...
It's become a very wealthy part of Scotland.
Exactly, and exactly. And if the price of oil dips, then the wealth of Aberdeen dips. And also, of course, because the European burgers who run...
European burgers?
Burgers.
Or like hamburgers?
No, like Burgers. The burger of a European town is called the Meister Burger.
Right.
Okay?
Go on then.
So the European burgers who run Europe have now decided that we can't fish for our own fish like we used to. So people in...
How did we get from the Europa League to this?
Hang on.
In 5 minutes.
People in Port Patrick, right, on the north-south-east, the west coast of Scotland.
West Coast, yes.
Who used to...
That was where that guy used to go on the fishing boat, wasn't it?
That's what I was going to tell
why
you.
Know about Port
who
Patrick.
Boys of the age of 18 used to earn £1,000 a week by going fishing 3 or 4 days a week, come back, split the catch, £4,000 for a catch, driving around in Ferraris.
Was Port Patrick known as the fish city then?
It was Fish City,
right?
Except it's not a city; it's a village. But it's kind of it's a little fishing port.
It's a town, isn't it?
It's a little town.
It's a town,
but it's a small one,
right?
And that's all gone now. So there's no wealth in oil in Aberdeen. There's no wealth in fish on the other side. Scotland's slipping down the economic league of countries in
but Celtic
Europe.
Went to Amsterdam and they got a pretty good.
They got a very good result. And old Ronnie, what's his name? Ronnie who?
Hey, Ronnie Delia.
Ronnie Delia, he needed it, didn't he? He needed it.
Did.
But
he's got to talk to Mal.
Because I think we should.
I'm slightly worried. I'm slightly worried that we're kind of coming at this from the wrong angle.
No, we should.
Oil, fish, coal. Let's talk to Mal about football. Mal, what are you got to say?
How are you doing, guys?
Very well, indeed.
Good.
Staying up in Scotland, obviously, apart from Man United, I'm also a Rangers fan, but it's just they're talking about Aberdeen. I think they're not giving enough credit that they deserve because they're doing well so far, and Celtic are, to be honest, are not a big team.
Yeah.
And the crowds, they're saying they're getting 6 times the crowds as other teams are. Well, they're not, to be honest, they're only getting about 40,000.
Yeah.
What's the difference, Mal, between the amount of money that Aberdeen's team cost to put out there and Celtic's team?
Well, that's fair enough, a good point, obviously, but at the end of the day, Aberdeen are 5 points in front, and there's, to be honest, player-wise, there's not much difference.
No.
And some of the Celtic players, to be honest, some of the Celtic fans say that Scott Brown and Lee Griffiths are 2 of their best players. Lee Griffiths, you're better off with Terry Griffiths.
Yeah.
Well, that may well be right.
Absolutely. Mel, tell me this, please. When Aberdeen go away, do you know how many fans they take with them? Because the amount of fans that Celtic still take away is phenomenal, like 10,000.
And that's where all the other teams actually make some money.
Yes,
when Celtic actually come and play at their home ground.
Do you know how many travelling fans Aberdeen have, Mal?
Well, yep, to be honest, guys, Aberdeen are one of the best away supporter teams in Scotland. They come to my local team, Kilmarnock, which is down the road. Yeah. Aberdeen usually bring 2,000 or 3,000 to Kilmarnock.
That's incredible. How far away is it?
Aberdeen, Kilmarnock, you're talking about maybe 3-4 hour drive.
That's incredible.
3 or 4 hour drive.
That is incredible. That's 200
miles. Why are you
miles.
asking him how far away it is? I mean, we want Mal's view on what he thinks about Celtic and what he thinks about their...
He's told us that.
He has told us that. I think they've done well. What do you make of Liverpool's result? Do you think that was as good as well?
Liverpool shouldn't be concentrating on a minor competition. They should be concentrating on getting their act together in the league. So when Harry Redknapp is talking about it being a distraction to clubs in the Premier League, I believe he was focusing really on the Liverpool situation.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Well, I mean, that's
not the Spurs situation.
That's the ridiculous thing. We have this conversation more or less every season about the Europa League because teams want to get into the top 4. If they can't, they try and get into Europe. Then once they're in Europe, they don't want to stay in it. Apparently.
Yeah.
And as you might have seen on one of the back pages this morning, I think it's only 9 English players that could play for Roy Hodgson in the Champions League this week, right? Out of some ludicrous number like 352.
That's right.
And it just seems completely and utterly ridiculous because all these teams that are going into the Champions League, into the Europa League, are not really going into it to win it. They're just going into it to be in it and then try and get in it year after year after year and make the money.
That's a good point. Harry Redknapp's been listening to me. Listen to this quote. The Europa League is a distraction at this stage. It can unsettle players. By having an extended run in this competition, you're taking a gamble with your Premier League form. Where did you first hear that?
So what's the point? Yeah, I know you've said that for years.
Yes,
you have said that for years.
I said at the start of this season.
I know, and it has been the kind of ruin of many Premier League clubs who have managed to get themselves into the Europa League. But the problem is, if you get high enough up in the Premier League, then you go into it. So what's the point of trying to get higher up and going into it and then trying to get out of it?
Because I think every club in this country and in the rest of Europe, because some of the big clubs in Europe are shackled by this problem with the Europa League as well, should have the right to refuse the invitation to take part in the Europa League.
Why should they?
because they should say, we finished 5th in the Premier League, we love the position there, we're not going to waste the improvements we made this season on a prolonged Europa League programme, which could be up to 19 games. Thank you very much for the invitation, not interested in being in your competition, would like to win the FA Cup or the League Cup, and finish 3rd in the Premier League next season.
But then we also hear that everything is a distraction to the Premier League, but if you're not going to get into the top 4, then what's the point of whether you finish 5th or whether you finish 12th or whether you finish 14th?
Well, to be honest, Mike, what you've sort of lost here is that, you know, football is not just a business, it's there to entertain the fans.
Exactly.
The 20, 30 or 40,000 that come each week. Now, take my club Everton. If we have a run this season and finish up 5th, the fans will be very, very happy. I mean, I know there's a faction of the fans who are constantly unhappy about the board and all that kind of stuff.
But wouldn't they like to win a trophy as well? Wouldn't they like to get to the Europa League, possibly win it, and possibly get into the Champions League the following year?
What I'm saying is there's a feel-good factor for a team that finishes 5th, because you've seen some sparkling home games beating teams like Chelsea, which we've just done, OK? Right. On top of that, if you got to a final or won a domestic cup, the FA Cup or the League Cup, that is brilliant. I think then you should be allowed to say next season, look, we don't want to be in the Europa League, thanks. We don't rate the competition, and it drains us of our resources. No, thank you.
So somebody else gets the place?
Absolutely. Give it away to anybody who wants it.
Well, that's ridiculous.
No,
that
it's
would
not
work at all.
It would then be offered to the 6th team, and if they wanted to say, no, we don't want it either, then the 7th, then the 8th, then the 9th, and so on.
No, because in that case, what would happen is the English Premier League would lose more and more spaces in Europe, and the coefficient would disappear.
They'd only lose spaces in the Europa Trophy. They wouldn't lose spaces in the Champions League Trophy, which is the only one worth playing in.
I think we should seek the guidance of some of the people listening to this, because I think you've gone completely bonkers.
I don't mind seeking guidance from people.
After 3 nights on the 4th night broadcast,
you've got to remember, most people tune into this show to take guidance from me.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
Absolutely not.
They do.
08717 22 33 444. Give us a call. Mike Parry, I think, has finally lost the plot. This is Talk Sport.
Talk Sport. On air, online and on TV at Sky Channel 0108.
Psychotherapy, psychotherapy, psychotherapy. That's what they want to give me. Psychotherapy, psychotherapy, psychotherapy. What they want to give me. I'm a teenage.
This is Talk Sport. We are the two Mikes. There will be a podcast coming out a little bit later on, of course. It's also Ask Porky tonight. Sorry, it's not. It's the Porky quiz, I should say, on the Battle of Britain, which is the expert subject. That will be coming up a little bit later on. But some dramatic developments, Mr. Parry, a few hours ago over at FIFA.
Bandits at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, well, what we don't know is precisely why this has happened, but the FIFA Secretary-General, who's otherwise known really as Sepp Blatter's right-hand man, Jerome Valcke, has been put on leave, released from his duties until further notice.
He is actually, Mike, the guy who runs FIFA on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I mean, he's been sort of mentioned in dispatches ever since this whole thing blew up.
Absolutely.
And there's been documentation which has included his name.
Yes.
Nothing legal or illegal has been has happened yet, but and I presume he's been suspended on full pay. But let's talk to Brian Sciaretta over in New York, because the US Attorney General was talking a little bit earlier on in the week about more indictments and possibly more charges. Brian, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Oh, good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
What do you make of this this suspension by FIFA? What's behind it, and what's likely to happen next, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of information is flowing right now, and this is a steady drip of information. It's moving quickly, behind the scenes a lot with the whole FIFA investigation, and Jerome Valcke. It's not just this ticket problem, this ticket charge that has been brought now, and which is the reason why they've relieved him from his duties. But it's also the whole thing about the money payments he allegedly made to the Jack Warner's company in Trinidad and Tobago for the South Africa rights. So there's a lot of things surrounding this guy right now, and where there's smoke, there's often fire, as we see in federal investigations in this country.
Brian, not to be melodramatic here, but to use that well-worn phrase, not fit for purpose, how long can FIFA exist as a body in their present form when they literally stagger from crisis to crisis to crisis? It's involved 7 people, original 7 FIFA officials who were arrested. We've got a list of those: Jeffrey Webb, Eduardo Lee, Julia Rocca. But now we've got the man who on a day-to-day basis is FIFA, the man who actually has his hands on the levers, presses the buttons, now suspended from being able to do that job. I don't know if FIFA can survive.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the more extreme scenario, and I'm not saying this is imminent, but I mean, you could actually find a whole organization, not just an individual, as a criminal organization and disband it. I mean, if it's so bad, so rotten to the core, that's the atomic option, as we like to say here. It's just its whole structure right now is preventing itself from reforming itself because it needs the executive council to approve of any of these whole-scale changes, and they're the ones who are probably at the circle of any kind of wrongdoing, and so the whole organization can't really change or fix itself. So it's really an inherent disaster. It's going to take someone to come in almost like a revolutionary and a series of them, and the whole organization might have to start from ground up, somewhere down the line if this thing keeps unraveling at the pace it has.
Yeah, I mean, you see, what I think could happen, Brian, is I think it would only take one major football association to say we no longer recognise FIFA, and that could be the United States. The United States have launched the inquiry. We heard the Attorney General talking earlier this week. The moment they say, look, I'm sorry, we don't recognise them as a legitimate body anymore representing football, that's it, isn't it? The game's up.
Well, no, you're going to need probably some people who have more influence in the sport. I mean, United States soccer is, I don't know, it didn't exist for nearly 40 years as a relevant football country. Yes, it's governing and it's money and that stuff and broadcasting and that stuff all has a tremendous say. But I think if things came along where it was like they were joined by Germany or England,
that's what I mean,
or Spain or Italy.
But I think, Brian, you'll find that Mr. Platini wouldn't be too slow in taking his initiative from the Americans and deciding that there are, better people around in the world to run football.
But I don't think that's not going to happen as a result of this, though, is it? Because the situation with Valka is that there's been plenty of allegations made about senior figures at FIFA who have not been charged. And Valka says that this is not a relevant inquiry. Says that he's innocent of anything that he's
But he's been suspended from running it on a day-to-day basis.
Well, exactly.
So who's running FIFA?
Well, that's what I'm going to ask Brian. I'm going to say to Brian, what has changed that has made FIFA decide to suspend this guy, notwithstanding what's gone on before?
I mean, you have to realize that there's a lot of information now flowing behind closed doors that we don't know about. I mean, you have all these extraditions only now beginning to take root and people coming over and people talking. And when they come over here, FIFA executives are not the kind of people who are really able or willing to do hard time in prison. I mean, they're the more the people that are willing to give up information probably, and this is speculation on my part, rather easily than do hard time, or if they're in the face of criminal charges. Now you have all that information to weigh through, and then the fact is that who knows? Maybe they probably all know what's being said. We don't. But this is when you see this kind of numbers and this kind of dollar figures at stake and circulating around amongst an organization which let's face it, most of the public believes is very untrustworthy and very corrupt. Now all of a sudden you have the very likelihood that there could be more substantial charges coming out. I mean, this is not stopping. This has been pretty consistent since that hotel swarm in back in May, I believe it was. So now there's been consistent charges, consistent rumors, consistent allegations being made since then, and it's not going to really stop until it goes probably to the core of the whole thing, which is probably through Blatter and through the executive committee, and this is all alleged, but it's starting to unravel at a pretty quick rate.
Well, let's see how that all develops over the next few hours, if indeed it does. While we've got you on, Brian, story in a couple of the papers here this morning about the Glazers and how much they're going to share as a dividend from Manchester United. 15 million, it says the Glazer children are going to get. What's the reaction to that?
I think it's... they're just being paid a natural dividend, which is pretty normal. I think it just shows you what is the staggering value of the elite teams in the world of global soccer. I mean, this doesn't represent, this is only like the upper 0.1% of teams are involved in this, but it just shows you that like the Premier League, particularly storied teams, are really separating themselves from the pack in terms of value and stature, and being able to float a dividend like that, and particularly in the world of sports where you don't make a lot of money. Even the big teams over here in the United States, a lot of them lose money. But to see people, I mean, these are profits that come out of dividends. So, I mean, it's just a staggering sum of money that they're earning as owners and stockholders. So, it's just eye-opening in the fact that it shows you what the global, they're not even in the Champions League yet. They took a big revenue hit. When that comes back, I mean, it's just going to be even more and more and more. So it's just astounding, and it's just an eyebrow-raising thing about where the television rights and how much the game has transformed, even over the past 10 years in terms of the money.
No, the money's absolutely staggering now, isn't it? Brian, thanks very much indeed. Brian Sciaretta there with the latest on what's going on with the FIFA story.
By the way, don't you think, sorry, Mike, to interrupt, don't you think it's a little bit unfair that all the reports of the financial picture of Manchester United, probably the richest club in the world, paying these dividends to 6 Glazier siblings, 6, including, a daughter who's never even been to Manchester United, she gets £2.5 million. I think it's terribly unfair in the reporting of that to say, and David Moyes cost the club £35 million.
Well, he did, though, didn't he?
He didn't. He took over as manager when the team was falling to pieces.
But he cost them the Champions League.
And he was made a scapegoat. And to say that cost him £35 million is grossly unfair, in my view.
Well, it was because of his underperformance as the manager and as the team that he was in charge of. They didn't make the Champions League, and that was why they lost the Champions League revenue.
Yeah, but to say £35 million means they would have won the Champions League. It's grossly unfair to say, well, they would have had a great run if they'd been in the Champions League. They might have gone out in the group stage.
They might have done, but they would still got more money. Though.
So I think that's a gross calumny on behalf of Davy Moyes.
But also the idea that the Glazers are pocketing, as some of the papers are suggesting, this money. I mean, they own the club, and so surely you would expect them to do that.
The reason the fans will get so upset about it is because of the way that the club was leveraged into debt when they took over, and therefore the dividends are coming out the pockets of the fans who go through the turnstiles and pay their Sky subscriptions, not from an accumulation of wealth within the business of the club.
Sure. Well, it's a very complicated story. We'll be talking about more of that. Also, of course, we'll find out how those Europa League games actually went, and we're talking about rugby as well tonight, because Rugby World Cup gets underway. England play Fiji in the opening game. This is Talk Sport with the 2 Mikes.
Driven to the limit. Power steering.
Talk Sport.
That boy needs therapy. Psychosomatic. That boy needs therapy. Psychosomatic. That boy needs therapy. Lie down on
This
the
is
couch.
Talk Sport. We are the 2 Mikes. The Porky Quiz coming up a little bit later on in the show on the Battle of Britain. There will be a podcast coming out as well. We're going to look ahead to all the Rugby World Cup games this weekend, and of course all the Premier League stuff as well. Last night, the British teams, I'm going to say, rather than English teams, did rather better, didn't they, in the Europa League than the English
Still
Premier
only
League
one victory, though, eh?
Only one victory, but a few more points. Ajax 2, Celtic 2. Of course, it was Bordeaux 1, Liverpool 1, and Spurs was the only one that actually managed to get themselves 3 points against Karabag from out there in Azerbaijan or somewhere like that. Anyway, let's talk to Matt, who's a Chelsea fan who wants to talk about the Europa League and what you were saying earlier. Matt, very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I think Liverpool made a big mistake not playing a full-strength team. At the end of the day, I think now, with the Europa League being a passage into the Champions League, I think it's a very good competition to win.
Yeah, but aren't you glad they played a full-strength team? It means there's less opposition when they play Chelsea.
No, I mean,
That's your team, by the way.
I'd rather see English teams do well in Europe, personally.
Yeah, well, I'd like an English team to win the Champions League. I haven't got a problem with that, but I think they're wasting their time in a second-rate competition like the Europa League, completely draining their players of strength and energy they need for a great Premier League campaign.
But don't you think as well, Matt, that there's a kind of almost schizophrenic attitude to the Europa League? Teams want to do well in the Premier League. They want to try and get as high as they possibly can. But if they get high enough, they then go into the Europa League, and they don't seem to know really what to do.
I mean, surely that's the whole purpose of having a 25-man squad so you can compete in all competitions.
Well, exactly right. And people say, well, of course, the Premier League is too tough and they can't play all these games because it means that they weaken their position in the league. But it's almost a ridiculous situation. They try to get higher and higher and higher up the Premier League, but then they don't seem to want to then play in Europe, which is the reward for doing that. Doesn't make any sense.
I mean, like a few years ago, Chelsea came third in their Champions League group, and we moved down to the Europa League, and we ended up winning that. I think we still came in the top 4. So it just shows that it can be done.
Well, it can, but not every club has got your resources, Matt, or the size of squad that you've got, or the quality of players you've got. That's the honest truth. When you went into the Europa League, you had to make a determined effort to win it, because otherwise it would have been a humiliation for Chelsea. And Benitez was right to focus on making that a priority, and he got there. So, full marks to him. But unless you're going to win it, it's not worth being in it.
Well, Brendan Rodgers has spent a lot of money over the last couple of seasons, and a lot of those Liverpool players, like Philippe Coutinho, he will want Champions League football before long. If Liverpool don't get it this year, I reckon he'll probably be off next season.
Mm-hmm. But that might well be where Liverpool are. How important is that winning of the Europa League to Chelsea fans and to you, Matt?
Oh, I think it's very important. I mean, as a fan, I want to see the team go for every competition we're in. You know, for those Liverpool fans who travel to Bordeaux, they want to go there and see the full strength of the Liverpool team. They don't want to go there and see the reserves playing. When fans pay money to see their club, they want to see the best players playing, surely. I think
you're absolutely right. Let's find out from Vernon if he agrees. Vernon, very good morning to you.
Oh, hello, guys.
What do you think of the Europa League, then?
I'm in total agreement with Porky.
Really?
I just think, and Harry Redknapp.
That's twice this week somebody's been in agreement with you.
Well, that's not a surprise, yeah.
I just think competition in its present format is a real drag.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely affects every team that plays in the Premier League in their form. Their form definitely suffers. I mean, look at Everton last year.
Yes, absolutely right.
But you might say the Champions League affects the form of every Premier League team as well. Do you want to do away with that?
Indeed it does, MG, but I'll tell you the difference. The Champions League, when you win the Champions League, Chelsea won £100 million in prize money. When they won the Europa League, they won about £5 million.
I'm surprised it's that, Vernon. I'm surprised it's that, and I can tell you something. Money.
That's what it is worth over with all the add-ons, the TV money, all the.
I'm surprised it's worth that because I tell you what, the television revenues in the early rounds of the Europa League barely cover your costs to go to places like Poland.
I tell you, you're right, Paulie, but I tell you what I think could help zing it up. Well, I think take it back to its former glory. When I remember when I was a little kid, on things like Sports Night, it used to be called the UEFA Cup.
Yes.
And it was almost, I wouldn't say it's as big as the European Cup, of course it wasn't, but it wasn't a bad second. And
well, actually, it was third. It was third, Vernon, because you had the Cup Winners' Cup. You had the Cup Winners' Cup and then the Fairs Cup. Yeah.
I think what could zing it up, though, is if they take it, strip it back and make it an open draw, no seedings, and home and away leg sudden death, and do away with away goals. I think away goals I would like away goals done away with in all football, because I think it's an old thing now that
that's another argument altogether.
It is,
there's
but I think
a lot of strange pips going on your line, Vernon. But thanks for making that point. Who was the person responsible for making the Europa League so long and drawn out anyway? I mean, presumably UEFA came up with that idea.
Yeah, absolutely, because they wanted it to be, a prominent competition. But we've all lost the focus on why it's there in the first place. Right. Now, in the old days, when Manchester United and Celtic won their European Cups in 67 and 68 respectively, the only teams that entered the European Cup were the team that won the league. Sure. So the secondary competition and the third competition were for other European...
The top four, basically, wasn't it?
Well, all I'm saying is it was to keep an interest going for clubs who had a European target. Right. But these days, in this country, we've always had 4 teams in the Champions League. We don't need any more teams in Europe. We really don't.
We do, but isn't it also partly to do with the expansion of Europe, and now that there are more countries, there are more teams, there are more leagues, all of that, but presumably they've made the Europa League so kind of expansive and so long and drawn out because they thought it would make more money, but it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
So why don't they just contract it slightly?
There is a political issue here as well. Yeah. I mean, we know that the Continentals, as opposed to the Anglo-Saxons, which we are, the Continentals want a united Europe.
The Continentals being who?
The Continentals being the countries that are on the continent, Mike, funny enough.
The countries that might have invaded us and kind of merged with us, like the Normans from France, for example.
No, I'm talking about every country on continental Europe. Do you know where that is?
Yeah, but the point
That's on the other side of what they call the English Channel.
Yeah, but people from continental Europe have been coming here for many, many years, many centuries. So the Anglo-Saxons are not actually really in existence anymore.
Well, I'm Anglo-Saxon, so I'm in existence.
How do you work that out?
Because I'm an Anglo-Saxon.
How do you know?
What do I look like?
Well, you look like a Welshman.
Do I look like a Jute?
Well, you could be Welsh.
No,
you have bits of Welsh
I'm an Anglo-Saxon, right?
You know that your family tree goes all the way back and is not in any way connected to the Normans, not in any way connected to the Vikings.
I am Anglo-Saxon.
How 100%. Do you know?
I know.
Right.
I know.
Okay.
My bloodline is Anglo-Saxon.
Well, you're in a minority then.
And a bit of Saxon. But, I mean, you put them together and that's what I am. Now, what I'm saying is, there's a political will in Europe for us to be one nation. They don't want countries called France, Germany, Belgium, Holland, England.
I think that might be changing even as we speak.
Well, maybe in recent events. Yeah. And the football process is designed to bathe that political will for European integration.
Yes.
And for that reason, they have competitions which make us all seem as though we're playing in the same country.
Yeah, but even they don't want to have competitions which aren't actually, paying for themselves. So surely what should happen is they just make it a shorter competition, a smaller competition. For example, the group stage.
They should scrap it.
Just have one team that goes through.
Do you know what they should do? Mr. Platini should sit down with the TV bosses and say, is it worth having this competition anymore? What revenues do you make out of it? And when they say, no, it's not, it costs more to ship cameras over to Holland than it does to get the revenues from people who pay to watch these games, just scrap it. It's rubbish. We get 4 teams in the Champions League every season because we've got a great record in Europe. The one thing you should bring back...
we might not have 4 teams for the foreseeable future.
Well, that's another issue, but you're absolutely right. The one thing they should bring back is the European Cup Winners' Cup.
Yeah.
So that the winners of the domestic cup competitions could have their own separate competition, which would have some worth.
Yeah.
But to have a rambling, God knows how long it goes on, UEFA League, involving hundreds of teams from countries some of us have never heard of, is just rubbish. It is utter rubbish. And I don't know why other people aren't as honest as I am in damning the competition as being a waste of time.
Well, I'm going to ask you a very important question, but I'm not going to ask you it now. I'm going to ask you it next.
OK.
This is Talk Sport with the 2 mics.
On DAB Digital Radio and 1089 and 1053 AM.
A terrific performance.
Turn of pace and eye for goal.
Shout about it.
Talk Sport.
There's only one way of life, and that's your own.
This is Talk Sport. We are the 2 mics. There will be a podcast coming out a little bit later on. We're talking about the Europa League. We're going to talk to Stephen Caldwell about that in a moment. We'll ask his opinion of it. And also, we'll be looking ahead to a couple of the big Premier League games coming up this weekend. Just before we do that, though, Mr. Parry,
yes.
You claim to be an Anglo-Saxon. One of the things you said you were not was a jute.
That's right.
Now, can I just give you the definition of jute?
Yes.
It is a long, soft, shiny vegetable fibre. So it is not in any way related to any kind of...
Well, they make sacking out of the material jute.
They do, yeah.
Right, but...
It's a fibre.
No, it's not.
It's like sort of cotton.
It's also a group of people.
No, it isn't.
It is.
There is no
it's a
reference
group of,
that I can find
it is.
to people
Excuse
being
me.
referred to as jutes.
It's a group of Teutonic people who are floating around in sort of the Dark Ages.
Floating around?
Yeah.
In the Dark Ages?
Yeah, in Europe.
In Europe?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
I'll see if I can find
They
any
lived in
reference to
forests.
that. In forests?
Yes, they did, yeah.
And what were they kind of, known
No, they were
for?
like tribal. They were tribal people.
Really?
And eventually they pitched up in sort of France, and then a few of them came here, didn't like it because of the weather, and went back.
I think you may be mistaken.
No, I'm not. I'm
else.
not mistaken. Can I read you some tweets, please? Because I think I should read these tweets when they come in like this.
OK.
This says, let me see. Hang on. There's a particularly attractive one here. Hang on. Oh, yeah, here we go. This is from Marcus. Hi, Mike. To tell you the truth, you two have saved my life. Thank you very much indeed. Thank the stars you're there. I like these sort of tweets.
How have we saved his life?
I don't know. But this is what we're here for. And there's another one here which says I'm brilliant, but I can't... here we go.
Is that one you sent in yourself?
No, I didn't send it myself, but I just thought I'd read it out because it shows despite Mr. Graham's gerrymandering tonight, mate, you can hit 8 out of 10. I believe in you. Good luck and all this kind of stuff, OK? And
that's on the Porky quiz. We're not doing that now, though.
No. That will be later. That will be later. Okay.
Well, let's do the Europa League now because we've got Stephen Caldwell.
Yeah. I want to do that, but I just thought I'd read that out because I've just seen it. And you never read out any tweets which are in praise of me. You just read out tweets about yourself.
I just read out the ones that come into the 2 mics account.
Oh, I
let's
see.
talk to Stephen and first of all find out how he is. Stephen, how you doing?
Yep. Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well indeed. What do you want to tell us, please?
Well, what do you mean, what do you want to tell us?
Yes.
That's not the first question. He's a guest on the show.
Oh, I say, I'm
He's
sorry.
Not a caller.
I'm awfully sorry, Stephen. I confused
Caldwell.
you with... I'm so sorry, Stephen. I lost my concentration there a bit. I was looking at the tweet. Steve, it's great to have on the show again.
There.
Yeah, you're not the only...
I don't want to tell you anything.
You're not the only one that's confused, Stephen.
That's right.
We want to ask you a little bit about some of the games coming up
Certainly
this weekend in the Premier League. We've been having this argument about the Europa League, which we have, almost every season. I find it kind of strange that teams try to get as high up the Premier League as they can, qualify for Europe, and then when they get there, they don't seem sure whether they want to play in the Europa League or not.
Yeah, I think the issue is obviously the difference in money between Champions League and Europa League is huge. I know that from my time at Birmingham, where we obviously qualified for the Europa League to the League Cup in the season before I got there. And when we got there and we were trying to organise our bonuses and stuff, the club informed us that there was no real money in it until you get to the latter stages. So I kind of understand why the teams, maybe not in Tottenham and Liverpool's case, because I guess that they are contenders to win the trophy, but for some teams I understand why they don't feel their strongest side when they have a game on the Sunday. If they play on Thursday, it's very difficult, and you need a huge squad to be able to adapt to both competitions.
Steve, do you think that a board of a football club feels that they've become a glamorous operation because their fans are then trekking across Europe to watch them play European teams? And the team that I've got in mind at the moment for that is Middlesbrough. I remember how thrilled Middlesbrough were to have won the League Cup, as you talked about Birmingham winning the League Cup, and then to be embarking on European competition. And the chairman there was, what's his name, Steve... I don't know. You know, the chairman of Middlesbrough. Steve Gibson, that's him. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I remember seeing him at some do or something, and he said, look, the only place to be is Europe. Right. I want that for Middlesbrough every season.
Don't you remember Stoke as well, when Stoke got quite far into the tournament, and then they went down to Valencia, and just kind of more or less, not through the game, but fielded such a weak team, they just went out.
I do. But what I'm saying is, Steve, do you think it is a glamorous bonus boost that a chairman and a board can sort of give to their fans?
Yeah, I certainly think the winning the trophy part's huge. Obviously, it's a domestic trophy, whether it's the FA Cup or the League Cup. It's a very important thing for any football club, and no disrespect to teams, as you said, but mid-level clubs. Then when we get to Europe, I think the reality is, like I said, to make any real money, the prestige of it is great, but to make any real money, you have to get to the quarterfinals at least.
Exactly,
and, most squads, and I know that we were the season that I'm talking about, we were obviously in the Championship, but we were very stretched. We didn't have strength and depth like a Liverpool or a Man United last season, or bigger clubs who have that strength and depth. We didn't have that kind of ability to travel to Portugal, or I think we went to Slovenia. To travel to the places, come back late Friday or early Friday morning, late Thursday night, and to play on the Sunday was very, very difficult, and it probably cost us some points.
Without doubt. I mean, you're absolutely right there about the jet lag, about the sheer physical exhaustion of being on the road for some, 60 hours or something like that. I totally take your point, and this is why I believe clubs should have the right to decline to play in the Europa League if they wish.
Well, I think that if you ask our fans, it was an incredible experience for them. I know we went to Bruges and we won 2-1 in the last minute, and we had 7,000-8,000 Birmingham fans there on the night, and it was probably one of the most memorable games of my entire career. It was an incredible night. So the experiences that we had was phenomenal, and I think for a club like Birmingham, who hadn't been there for 50 years, it was an outstanding achievement and a real honour to be back in Europe. And God willing, they'll be there soon, but who knows when that'll be with their situation and their financial situation now. So it is an honour, but like I say, from a financial point of view and making money, it's very difficult unless you get to the last stages of the Europa League.
That's absolutely right.
But the other thing is, I suppose the other problem, Stephen, is it's so difficult now to get into the top four in the Premier League that, the second-tier competition, if you like, should be somehow taken more seriously. And it is by an awful lot more of the European sides, but it seems still, as I say, to be kind of looked down on here.
Well, it's a little bit like, I think, with the Premier League and the vast amounts of money we're being paid for television rights now, that we need to have some kind of system where we let that filter down into the Championship for sure and beyond, because we want to keep our football, our national football, strong. We don't just want the elite being so far ahead of the other ones and every club who gets relegated to be in severe financial trouble. So let's take that into Europe, and I feel that the money in the Champions League is ridiculous. So we have to find a way, maybe sharing that money a little bit and making the Europa League a real credible competition like it was, I don't know, in the 90s when I was younger. It was almost as good to win the UEFA Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup as it was to win the European Cup. So we need to try and get the prestige back in the tournament for sure.
Absolutely right. Story on the back page of one of the papers this morning. Just 9 Englishmen started in the Champions League this week.
Amazing.
Out of over 300 players in all the various different teams and all the different games that took place. That's a worrying statistic as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very concerning. I think there's one game a while back that got a lot of attention when Arsenal didn't field one English player, and to hear there was only 9 in the entire Champions League is concerning, and I'm sure that Roy Hodgson will be worried about that. It's not a good situation to be in.
No, it really isn't. And finally, Stephen, what about the performances this week in the Champions League? Only one team, Chelsea, managed to get a win. Is it just one of those kind of passing problems, or is it something deeper that we need to address?
Well, I think for a few years now we've been struggling a little bit in Europe. I think that we fell behind the German league and the Spanish league, obviously. And I know Juventus had a great campaign last year, but obviously as a whole we're stronger than Serie A. But they do seem to have teams that are performing at that level better than us. We're having a difficult time. I do think Chelsea will have a great campaign this year. I'm very surprised that City don't seem to be finding their feet in Europe. They seem to struggle year in, year out with the players they have and the quality they have. That's a surprise to me. And Arsenal, I think, was a little bit of a freak result. The sending off was harsh in my opinion. And to play with 10 men and try and be 2 goals down, concede the sloppy goals, and to try and come back was a tall order in Zagreb.
Yeah, it really was. Well, hopefully things will improve. Stephen, thanks very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us. That was an interesting insight from Stephen about when he was at Birmingham, actually managing to have a great game and having a little run in Europe. Let's talk to Chris, who's a Middlesbrough fan, because he can tell us what he thought of Middlesbrough. Chris, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yeah,
tell us about the Middlesbrough experience.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, that for a club like us, it's really hard, if not impossible, to ever reach the Champions League. So our view on Europe, as opposed to the view of a Chelsea or Man United fan in Europe, is completely different. The European experience we had in the 03-04 season is still regarded now, you can ask any Middlesbrough fan, as the greatest time in this club's history after winning the League Cup.
Is that when you got to the final in Holland, Chris?
Yeah, we got the final after beating Basel and Bucharest.
Yeah, but you got beaten 4-0 in the final, didn't you? I went to the game.
We got beat 4-0, which was pretty bad. But still, if you ask any fan around here, in the pub or wherever you meet them, they'll still say the fact that we got the final, and even the fact that we got to play homegrown players in the final, such as Stuart Downing and Tony McMahon, the Caldwell. It means a lot to the local people that we actually...
I'm not knocking that.
Well, you are knocking it, because you're saying it's a competition that people shouldn't bother playing it.
I'm not knocking it, because actually it turned out extremely well for you. And to compare it to my club, Everton, we won the European Cup Winners' Cup in the days when that was around. That wasn't the major competition in Europe, it was the second competition. And I remember that night in Vienna, where was it? That was in Holland as well, actually.
You remember that night? Was it in Vienna or was it in Holland?
No, we were playing Rapid Vienna at Feyenoord.
Oh, okay.
So I remember that night. So it was brilliant, Chris. And in fact, I was
it was yesterday.
I was at your final at the PSV Stadium, and although you got hammered 4-0 in the final, it was a great experience. I met lots of Middlesbrough fans there, including actually my mate Adrian Bevington, who was then,
Do you notice, Chris, how he's managed to turn your phone call into a story about himself?
No. What I'm saying is, Chris, what would the season have been like in terms of draining, your players' legs and all that kind of stuff, had you not reached that final and had such a great run in Europe? You might have a totally different view on it, and it was only the success that makes it look like a rose-tinted, spectacled adventure.
Possibly, yeah, but on the other hand, if we weren't in Europe in that season, it would have just been another forgettable season where we finished 7th, 8th, 9th in the league and did nothing else special. That season's remembered by our fans purely because we were in Europe. I mean, we got relegated a few seasons later, but that had nothing to do with Europe because we weren't in the competition at the time. But that particular season would have just been a non-season, a season like 3-4 years ago, which no one will remember in 10 years' time. I
absolutely agree with Chris. I mean, nobody's going to remember if you came 12th or 13th or 14th or 15th. Remember getting promoted, getting relegated, winning things and getting to finals. That's what you want, isn't it, out of a football club?
Yeah, and as well as that, teams like Chelsea, United, City, who can win things on a regular basis, even then, it's harder to remember you winning the Champions League in, say, 04 or 05 if you win it 2, 3, 4 times. If you reach a European final for the first time, and it's the only time you've ever reached it in your history, it sticks a lot more in your mind, especially for a club of our size.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Chris has shown why the Europa League, for teams that take it seriously, is actually worth being in. The problem for me is watching Tottenham play and watching Liverpool play, you just kind of don't get the idea that they're interested in being in it at all.
Well, I don't blame them. You see, Spurs still have ambitions to crack the top 4. Yeah. Everton have ambitions to crack the top 4. Happen. Middlesbrough, when they were in the Premier League, never had an ambition to crack the top 4. No. So it's a different point of view
but other clubs that have been in it have been more concerned about not being relegated as well.
on digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM.
The Two Mics on Talk Sport.
Good morning, I'm Mike Graham, he's Mike Parry. You're listening to the Two Mics and we're keeping you entertained throughout the night. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about Voodoo with Wade Davis, anthropologist and author. He's going to tell us about secret societies and what's going to happen now that the godfather of Voodoo has actually passed on. It's the Porky Quiz coming up a little bit later on, of course, on the Battle of Britain. And we've got loads more to do. Lots of stories in the papers that we're going to get our heads around and lots of other Porky ideas and campaigns, which are coming up very shortly. 08717 22 3344. You're listening to the Two Mics with me, Mike Graham, and Mike Parry on Talk Sport. This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics, and of course there will be a podcast coming out a little bit later on. Now, have you got any more tweets that you want to read out, or any more communications that have come in?
Well, you don't like me reading out tweets, which praise me. So
I don't mind that.
That means there's a lot of tweets I can't read out, you see.
And I've got this from that doc in New Zealand, who has been renamed. It used to be Hobbits in My Garden. She says, to balance the Porky tweet test, or tweet fest rather, it's clear MG is the brains and driving force behind the show. Porky provides the genius.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that better? So does that make me better than you?
I don't know. Would you prefer to be the brains behind the show or the genius behind the show?
Well, I don't know, really. I suppose a bit of both. What is that young lady's name?
Becky.
Becky, that's right. Why does she call herself Hobbits in the Garden?
Well, she's changed it now. She is that doc in New Zealand now.
That doc in New Zealand, OK, that's great. Well, there's one here. It says, how many times can old Porky lose the plot? You tell him every night, Mike. Has his head finally gone? But the point is, you'd say I've lost the plot when I come up with a theory which is too expansive for your brain to consider.
Not
That's
necessarily,
the truth, isn't it?
No, what I like to do then is ask the listeners
You can't handle
whether they agree with you that it is in fact a great idea, or it is so far ahead of its time that nobody will ever actually pick it up. How about this from JPK, who says, the true man of the people addresses guests as he does callers. Hashtag egalitarian.
Yes.
That's about you saying to Stephen Caldwell there, what do you want to tell us?
Well, to be honest, I thought, first of all, I thought Stephen was a caller.
Yeah.
Because I, was concentrating on other things. Then, when I realised he was a guest, I thought it was actually Stephen the musician who we're going to talk to later in the show.
Stephen the musician?
Yeah.
What, Steve Lillywhite?
Steve Lillywhite,
yeah. Later on in the show, much later on.
So then I started talking to him and realised he didn't sound like a musician because he was talking about playing for Birmingham City.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I'm sure that Steve the musician, who's based in LA and is a very famous singer-songwriter, didn't play for Birmingham City. So then I realised it was Steve Caldwell. Yeah. And I was delighted to have him on the show because he was very informative.
He was. Yeah. And we got that very good anecdote from him about what it was like to actually play in Europe as a smaller team.
Yeah.
But we've talked an awful lot about football, and we've got many other things to talk about.
Yes.
Not least, of course, the whole Rugby World Cup thing, which we're going to do a little bit later on.
Yeah.
What I'd like to ask you about, however, is some of the stories which are making news currently over the course of the last sort of couple of days.
Oh,
right?
Definitely.
Because one of the things that I've noticed on the Daily Mail lately is they're talking about a lot of property stories, right? And now that you're kind of an expert on property, I wanted to ask you about this. It's time to sell up your home, is what a financial watchdog is starting to tell the elderly, because in order to pay for your kind of upkeep in later life, you need to have plenty of money to put into the old care home for the people who are going to look after you. Now, have you made any provision for this?
Well, this is a huge problem in this country because more and more people are getting older, and there's as many people now who are not earning as there are earning. So the balance of society...
Well, people are living longer, is what you mean.
Of course they are.
I mean, people have been getting older for years, haven't they?
Yes, but they're retiring earlier as well.
Are they not retiring later now? Because they have to.
No, a lot of people are retiring early. A lot of people, particularly in the public sector, and they've got a massive public sector in this country. Over 1 million people work in the public sector.
Yeah.
And they retire on very beneficial pension rights, which you and I pay for in our council tax. So that's all a bit forlorn. But as for the system here, the problem is that the cost of care for old people is so expensive that no family can sustain it without having to liquidate the assets of their elderly parents.
Which means that having spent their lives kind of accruing some kind of property that they'd like to pass on to their kids, they have to actually end up selling it in order to pay for their care.
They do. Or you see, we should do what they do in India and build an extra room on the house and then bring the old parents to live.
Yeah, but in a lot of cases you're not allowed to do that, are you?
Well, in a lot of cases you're not, but also in a lot of cases as well, people don't want to do it because they get they find it difficult to live with their elderly parents because it doesn't make sometimes for familial harmony. Now, you know all about familial harmony.
I do know all
you?
about familial
yeah,
harmony.
Familial harmony can be broken.
It can be quite difficult to achieve.
Yeah,
especially if you actually bring in, somebody from the older generation suddenly into a family where a family unit is, just about holding itself together. And suddenly you bring somebody in who is one of the parents of those two other parents. I mean, it's a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, but unfortunately, your parents die as well.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, that's the worst scenario because then you've got a single elderly parent who can get lonely.
Right.
Now, talking about lonely, by the way, Mike, did you know I've seen a report recently saying that loneliness is one of the biggest killers now in this country?
Loneliness?
Yeah, loneliness. It's an epidemic and it gets people.
Right.
Now, you see, I'm entitled to talk. Yeah. If you thought obesity was our biggest health problem, we've overlooked the desperate side effects of social isolation, and it's about people who are...
Well, you've been telling me for years that obesity is the biggest problem we face.
Well, it's not. Loneliness can be as well.
Loneliness is now the biggest problem we face.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it can make people so despairing and all that they wither away and die and all this kind of stuff. Now, I'm an expert on loneliness.
Why is that?
Because I've never been married, so I have lived alone, technically.
But you spend
most
of
my
time
life
in your own company, and you don't mind that.
No, I don't mind. This is absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But what I would say is this: what I would say is that I can handle what other people think is loneliness because I'm not alone.
And you're never lonely then?
I'm never lonely.
Has there never been a time when you've suddenly sort of woken up in the middle of the night and thought, I'm all alone?
No.
I'm going to be all alone till I die?
No.
And so I must be lonely?
No, I've never thought that at all. No, never. I mean, my quite selfish view on life is that if I'm the only person in my house, I can then lead my life exactly as I want to.
Right.
I don't have to make any compromises. I don't have to watch a TV programme that somebody else wants to watch. I don't have to entertain...
You don't have to come home when somebody tells you to come home.
I don't have to come home when somebody tells me to. I don't have to entertain boring people who happen to be the friends of your spouse, you know what I mean, which you have to do as a compromise. I don't have to do things that the spouse wants to do, like go shopping, or go to the cinema to watch a film that I think is boring rubbish, but which she thinks is entertaining. And I don't wish to sound harsh here and all that kind of stuff, but that was my life choice. You see what I mean? That's my life choice. And if I decide that I've been working too hard lately and today is going to be a day of bladderation, okay, then I go off and do it without coming home and having my ear bent for behaving poorly.
Yes, indeed. And because, I suppose what you're saying, basically, is loneliness is only suffered by people who have spent time with somebody else for a long period of their lives and then suddenly now find themselves on their own.
Not necessarily. People can grow up like spinsters and men who never met their partner in life and who find, as they get older, their loneliness is crippling. Now, sometimes in a supermarket, I will see an old lady who might sort of resemble my old mum, who's now in her 80s, okay?
Right.
And I see this poor old person buying, like, meagre food. I sometimes feel like putting my hand in my pocket and saying, here's a tenner, go and get some better food. And they buy their meagre food, and then they buy their newspaper at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when most people should have read a newspaper by 6 a.m, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I see them walking off out of the supermarket, and I feel very sorry for them. I think, I wonder if you're going home to a lonely home on your own, and you feel alone, and you haven't got enough money to heat it and all that kind of stuff.
Maybe they're watching you buying your food and thinking exactly the same thing.
Why would they think that?
Because they see what you buy, like a sort of, fish for one or something like that. Or,
No.
One hamburger or, one pork chop or something like that. Maybe they're looking at you and thinking the same thing.
No, that's not the case, because they will probably see me buying a piece of meat, which is a pure fillet joint, for £35.
For how many people?
Me.
For you?
Yes.
On your own?
Yes.
Yeah, but you don't buy huge joints, do you?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
And then cook them?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
You can't get them in a pot, can you?
You put them in the oven.
Oh, right, okay.
You put them in the oven, roast them.
Right.
And then it's beautiful, delicious meat, delicate meat and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then I might eat that for 2 days, and then I chop it up into pieces, and I put it in plastic boxes and put it in the freezer.
Put it in the freezer?
Yeah.
Good idea.
And then next time I get it out, I cook it up and put it in a Chinese chow mein. Is that a chow mein?
There is a chow mein.
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
You get the vegetables and you put them in with it and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Or
I'm hearing more about your culinary skills now.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, you see, because you
but
are
a lot
so...
of people who end up alone are ending up alone as you have because they want to.
Yes, that's absolutely true. But the people you feel sorry for, and you just highlighted it, are those who end up their lives alone and can't handle it.
Yeah.
Now, that's a terrible thing.
Exactly
and
right.
we should be much aware of it. We should invite old people into our homes on Christmas Day.
Well, why don't you do that?
Well, I can't, because I have to go and join my family on Christmas Day, and they wouldn't want me to bring an old person along with me because they wouldn't know the old person.
Why wouldn't you say to them, look, as a kind of gift that we're going to do as a sort of humanitarian thing, I'm going to bring somebody with me.
No, I wouldn't do that because that would disturb the equilibrium of the family gathering.
Have you never taken like a girlfriend to that or something?
Oh yeah, I have. Yeah. But Mum, it still disturbs the equilibrium of the family gathering. You'll find that a lot of people, like young couples, right?
Yeah.
You'll find this increasingly. So supposing I've got a niece and nephew, well, the niece might come to my sister's, that's her mother's, on Christmas Day, but then go off to her boyfriend's parents on Boxing Day. You see what I mean?
Right.
But they each spend one day, with their own parents without the equilibrium of the family group being upset by what you'd call an outsider. You see what I mean?
And it only becomes like the two families coming together if it then becomes like a very serious relationship, which sometimes happens, and that can be
it does. Yes.
scenario.
But by then you've got to know the person, so then they're regarded as not disturbing the equilibrium of the family unit. They are part of the family unit. You see what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
And then when a child is born, there's a grandchild. Then the grandparents go coochie all over the place, and they ignore the all the other associated pressures with the development of the family.
And that's when you can go down to the pub, presumably.
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah. I always go to the pub on Christmas Day. It's something you have to do. Otherwise, I go like what's it called? Cabin fever, stir crazy, something like that. Okay. So I just thought I'd let you know about that.
Thank you very much indeed for letting us know about that. We've got lots of other things we're going to let you know about as well. I'm going to remind you of your rugby experiences too. Coming up very shortly here on Talk Sport.
Okay.
We've really got the best of the best here today.
We're really pleased with it.
Yeah.
Talk Sport.
We are the two Mikes, and of course it's Porky Quiz Night. It's on the Battle of Britain coming up a little bit later on. A couple of texts have come in on the Jutes, funnily enough.
Oh, right, okay.
Here's one from Paul in Mitcham, who says, Mr. Parry is correct.
Thank you.
The Jutes were one of three most powerful Germanic tribes of their time.
Well, there you go.
The other two being Angles and Saxons, with whom they invaded Britain. So actually,
there you go.
The Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes were all from the same part of Europe. The Angles and the Saxons invaded Britain to presumably produce the Anglo-Saxons.
Absolutely.
Which means that actually everybody is from mainland Europe then, doesn't it?
Well, no, we survived. No.
When you say we...
The Anglo-Saxons.
Well, he's saying that the Angles and the Saxons also came from that part of the world.
Well, some of them did. But,
Germanic tribes.
Some of them did, yeah.
Right.
But the Jutes, you see, weren't good enough, so we trampled them into the dust.
Oh, I see.
And we survived.
And Paul, and then he adds, the Jutes settled in Kent, not in Cheshire. So Mr. Parry is not likely to be a descendant if his family originates from the northwest.
Well, it's not far from Kent to Cheshire, pal. You only got to go up
the
the
it's
M1,
a long way during the Dark Ages, isn't it? When there weren't any buses or trains or anything.
No. What was that called then? That was called, like, the Great North Road.
What was?
The road up to Cheshire.
Well, there weren't any roads in those days.
Yeah,
the Romans hadn't built any yet.
No, the Romans built the A1.
The Romans did not build the A1.
Yeah, they did.
They built a bunch of different sort of roads.
No, the Romans built the A1.
They built the road from London to St Albans, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, yeah. Which is now the A13, isn't it?
No, I think that's the M1 now, isn't it?
No.
Are you sure?
I'm certain.
Right.
St Albans is not on the M1.
Well, the Anglo-Saxons didn't then come and use those roads, surely.
Well, they spread all over the country.
Yeah, but weren't they there before?
The whole point.
Weren't they there before?
What?
The Anglo-Saxons.
Before what?
Before the Romans.
The Anglo-Saxons, they came in the Dark Ages, and the Dark Ages is the period immediately after the Romans went home.
Okay.
Because nobody knows what happened for about 400 years. There were no historians to record it. We don't know what was going on. We don't know which tribes, came out on top and all that kind of stuff.
So how do you know you're Anglo-Saxon then?
Because I've done family research.
Even into the Dark Ages where nobody knows what happened?
Well, not many people know what happened, but you have to research it heavily. Now, listen, the reason why we played Fire there, right, is because I think there's a good argument being put forward which might work to disband and abolish the fire brigade.
Being put forward by who?
Well, people who know about these things.
People who know about these things?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a ridiculous idea.
No, it's not ridiculous.
Are you in favour of abolishing the fire brigade, one of the emergency services?
Well, I think it should be merged with something else, you see.
Right.
I don't want to abolish society's ability to suppress and quell fires.
No.
For obvious reasons.
That would be stupid.
It would be stupid.
Yeah.
But to have a fully financed series of fire brigades across the country with huge, big, shiny machines which drive around.
Which they use to put out fires?
Sometimes.
Well, mostly.
No, sometimes.
Well, how else do they put fires out?
Well, you see, there's not enough fires to justify the amount of fire engines
Well,
we've
you
got.
say that, but I mean, that's why it's all being kind of slimmed down, isn't it? And that's
Well,
what
it's
the big
being slimmed
arguments are all
down.
about.
But here, I've got the figures here, right? Figures released at the end of last month. The fire brigades attended 495,000 incidents, right, in the year 2014-15.
So that's nearly 500,000.
That's nearly 500,000.
Yeah.
A decrease of 42% compared with the figure 10 years before that. Right? But of these incidents, only 31% were actual fires, 44% were false alarms, with other operations like floods, road traffic and animal rescue making up the rest.
Right.
In 2014-15, there were 258 fire deaths in England, 16 fewer than in the previous year and 30% lower than 10 years ago. Now, we don't want anybody to die in a fire for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
We don't want anybody to lose their home through a fire. We don't want property destroyed.
But those figures are, you know, not very clear, are they? It doesn't make it clear that there are less fires, necessarily.
No, it
just
does.
means that fire brigades are going out to do lots of different things, aren't they? Isn't that what it means?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. That's what. Yeah, but you see, the problem is, Mike, and anybody who's a fireman who's listening to this is now going to get, you know, the hump with me. Firemen spend a lot of the time polishing the machines and playing snooker in fire stations.
Well, that's because they have to be available to go to an emergency at any time.
I agree, but don't we need to, you know, utilise it? We should merge the fire brigade with the ambulance system and just have one vehicle.
No, you can't do that.
You can do it in France.
What, you can have an ambulance that actually has all the equipment that a fire engine has on it?
A mate of mine, no joke, in France, in the town square in Lille or something like that, somebody had an accident, a motor accident, you know, car hit them, and a fire engine turned up and took the person to hospital on a stretcher, which they loaded onto the fire engine.
Well, that doesn't sound very practical for a big city, though, does it?
No, it did. Yeah, it is.
Well, that's because it's only a little town. Yeah. I mean, that's the same in this country and the same in America, where they have volunteer fire department people who only
this was a main town. Lille's a main town.
Yeah, but they can't have merged it, surely.
Yeah, they have. They've merged it.
Idea.
I'm telling you, man, they've merged it. Now, the other thing is, and you know, you've got a modicum of intelligence, so you'll
Thank you very much.
agree with this. If I buy furniture now and put it into a flat that I want to rent out to somebody else, before it can be approved, somebody has to come around and inspect all the furniture, all the curtains, all the carpets to make sure they are fire resistant. Absolutely.
Somebody has to come around and inspect
Somebody has to come around and inspect
Well, that's
it.
ridiculous.
No, it's not.
That is ridiculous.
The door has got to be fire resistant.
Yeah.
A special door. The carpets, the curtains, all the furniture's got to be fire resistant. It's got to have a label on it.
It has a
saying
label,
fire
yeah.
resistant.
Well, funny
That's
enough,
right.
I know that there is some regulation around that because I was trying to get rid of an old sofa to some charity shop, right? And when they came around to collect it, it didn't have the requisite fire, label on it, and they said, no, we can't take it. We literally cannot. We cannot resell it.
It's illegal to have furniture that's not fire resistant.
Yeah, but that's ridiculous.
No,
isn't it?
it's not. Because where do you think fires start? Fires start when some idiot like you falls asleep in bladderation, drops his cigarette on the carpet. That sets fire to the carpet and the couch that you're
presumably
passed out on.
If the carpet and the couch are not flammable.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You've got a better chance of not causing a fire if you've got fire resistant furniture and carpets.
Well, I've
and all that
rented
kind of stuff.
properties from people. I've never seen anyone come around to check the furniture.
Well, they may not for your letting, but believe me, once a year they do.
Really?
Or twice a year they should. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I've never heard of that.
In private lettings, there's so much red tape now, and that is one of them. And believe me...
But in Lille, right, which is not a tiny town in France, I mean, it's quite a substantial-sized town, they can't only have one fire engine and, which has been merged with one ambulance.
No, they haven't.
That's where it goes.
No, they haven't. It's a combined service.
Really?
You see, the problem in this country is... because of the expansion of the National Health Service, they've had to find something for ambulances to do. So the ambulance service is overstretched.
Yeah.
But the fire brigade is underutilised.
People say they can't get ambulances, though.
Yeah, they do, because they're overstretched.
Well, what do you mean they have to find something for them to do? They've already got too much to do.
No. The thing is, Mike, if you create a bloated service like the National Health Service, then you've got to find something for it to do. So you classify illnesses which are not really illnesses. So if people are feeling a bit faint, they send an ambulance, whereas, 10 years ago we wouldn't have done.
I've never heard of that. If you try and get an ambulance, it's actually quite difficult. And if you're saying you're just feeling faint, they'll say, well, come to the hospital on your own.
No, often you'll find that they come. I like the ambulance service. I think they're very efficient. I think the people who drive the ambulances are very good, and they have quite a detailed knowledge of how to handle a patient.
Well, I'm sure they wouldn't fancy having a load of firemen, hanging off the back of it, though, would they?
Well, the firemen should be trained as paramedics.
Well, that's complicated.
No, it's not.
That's complicated.
It's not.
Because they probably have some first aid, they probably have some ability to do some of the stuff that paramedics do, but they should be trained as firemen.
When did you last see a burning building?
I haven't seen a burning building apart from on the news.
Yeah.
But there's been, big fires all over Britain in the past 6 months that you see on the news.
And we have to have a provision to put fires out.
Yeah, of course.
There's no doubt about it.
And that's what you need firemen for.
Yeah, but what do firemen do when there's no building on fire?
But you know what you're saying here? You're a bit like the consultants that came into the newspaper business and said, why have you got all these people sitting over here on this table?
Yeah.
And they were told, well, those are photographers.
Yeah.
And they said, well, why aren't they out taking pictures?
Yeah.
And the newspaper people said, well, taking pictures of what? You want them just out randomly taking pictures?
Yes.
That's not the point. The point is that if something happens, they go out and take pictures of it.
Yeah.
There's no point in them driving around the M25 taking pictures of nothing that's of any interest.
Right, that's not true. If you look at the Times these days, do you know one of the selling points of the Times these days is on every third page they have a beautiful panoramic picture of something like, a lake with swans on it or a sunset,
but that's something
going down or something like that.
A photographer to go and do.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
But I'm talking about the news photographers who actually go out and take pictures of things that are news.
You know as well as me, Mike, news photographers, the laziest bunch of inebriates in
but you
police
still
street.
needed them, though. You still needed them to be there.
They used to sit around in what we used to call the City Golf Club, which is in fact just an excuse to have a 24-hour drinking den, and just get completely bladderated. And often...
Unlike the reporters.
Reporters were usually doorstepping places and all that, but often when the picture editor, who himself was the one I worked for, was usually permanently bladderated...
You don't have to give his name.
Yeah, you can, because...
No, you can't, because he's emigrated, but he's still around, though.
No, he emigrated to Australia.
Yeah, I know.
His name was the Duke.
Yeah, that wasn't his real name. Well, you don't have to give his name out.
Why not?
Because he's still around.
Well, he was part of the culture of Fleet Street.
He was.
We were all bladderated. We've admitted that already, right? But when he used to pick up the phone and ring Harry Dempster, who was, a very senior photographer, don't worry, Harry's dead.
He is dead.
I went to his funeral. And say, Harry, you got to... Harry was too bladdered to get out of his seat
but you
and
still
go
needed
anywhere.
them occasionally when something happened. You needed a photographer to go and take a picture of it.
Yes, I agree.
And that's the same thing that firemen have to do.
I agree, but you can't have people sitting around doing nothing. Now, listen to this.
I'm not sure we've got time.
No, this is very quickly. I've got to tell you this.
Go on then, hurry up.
Right, there is... here we go. Right, London Fire Commissioner Sir Ken Knight, in his latest report, produced the remarkable statistic that the average firefighter now attends just 43 fires a year. That is less than one a week.
Well, it's nearly one a week as well.
It's less than one a week.
Well, so what are you going to do with it?
52 weeks in a year.
Well, he still has to attend one fire a week.
Yeah, but I mean, so why have we got a full-time, 7-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day firefighting organisation if they're all going out to one fire a week? It's ridiculous.
Well, it's an average figure.
No, you say once again, you cannot get your head around the fact that I have come up with a brilliant idea to try and reduce the cost of public services in this country.
Yeah, but you haven't costed it and you haven't told us
how many
firefighters
firefighters we've got in this country?
Yeah, there's no time for that.
45,000.
Well, we need all of them, every single one.
No, we don't.
You want to put them all
There's
on
only 19,000 people driving ambulances in this country. There's 45,000 firemen. That's ridiculous.
Well, I don't know what you mean. I don't know how you're going to make it work better. But we'll talk some more about that, because coming up next, maybe the voodoo expert can help you with it, because it sounds like voodoo to me, some of this nonsense you're coming out with.
It's not nonsense. How dare you brand it that?
It is nonsense. Look into the light for a minute. This is Talk Sport.
Talk Sport.
Can they rescue this game?
Learn to love the ball.
Wiry, thin, and whip it quick.
On DAB, Digital Radio, and 1089 and 1053 AM.
Fabulous shot. Don't miss out.
Oh, yeah. You've actually got in the history of the show, isn't it?
No, it's not. I like Jimi Hendrix. Brilliant. Died at 27.
Yeah, he certainly did.
Buried in Highgate Cemetery, isn't he?
I don't know.
Isn't he?
I think he's buried in Highgate Cemetery?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
So, yeah.
The Pope of Voodoo died aged 79 last weekend.
Max Beaver.
Max Beauvoir.
Beauvoir, yeah,
Not
okay.
Max
Beauvoir,
Beaver.
yeah, you're right.
It's kind of a French pronunciation, because he was in Haiti.
Mm.
He was head of Haiti's 6,000 witch doctors, would you believe?
Yes.
And Wade Davis is an expert on this subject, and we've got him on the show now. He's an author. He's written a book about this. Wade, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
How are you guys? Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah,
thanks for joining us. I saw this story earlier in the week, and I thought, fascinating kind of thing, voodoo. Nobody really understands it terribly well. How important and who was this guy, Max? Beauvoir?
It's great. I mean, I've been listening. It's just wonderful that with your sports show and all the excitement going on over there, you would take time to notice this.
Oh, definitely.
It's interesting, you guys. When you talk about religion, you ask name the great religions of the world. What do you say? Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, whatever. There's always one continent left out, isn't there? Sub-Saharan Africa, and the assumption is that people there, had no religion. Well, of course they did, and voodoo which has been sort of seen as this black magic cult, is simply the religion of West Africa. And the word actually means, in the Fon language of Dahomey or Benin, spirit or God. And when you know about it, it's actually a kind of marvelous religion in which the believer kind of has direct access to the divine, because you have this great experiential moment where the gods come upon you and you become the god. And when I was in Haiti, they would always say to me, "You white people go to church and speak about God. We dance in the temple and become God." And one of the things that's interesting is, where did we get this idea of voodoo being evil? It really began in the 1920s when the U.S. Marines occupied Haiti, and everybody by the rank of sergeant got a book contract. And the book titles had names like Black Baghdad, Cannibal Cousins, Voodoo Fire in Haiti, Puritans, Voodoo Land, The White King of La Note. And there were dozens of these books, all full of zombies crawling out of the grave to attack people, pins and needles and voodoo dolls that don't even exist, and children bred for the cauldron. And they essentially said, of course, those books gave rise to the RKO movies of the 40s, Night of the Living Dead, Zombies on Broadway, Zombies at the Strata. And all this stuff basically said to the American people during the era of segregation that any country where such terrible things happened could only find its redemption through military occupation. And that's part of how we got this idea of voodoo being evil. Okay. And Max Beauvoir was a really interesting man. He was a very successful biochemist. He studied at the Sorbonne.
In France,
he went back to Haiti. He worked for a while in the United States as a chemist. And his grandfather died, and on his grandfather's deathbed, he asked Max to do something for the religion of the country. Yeah. And Max became kind of this. He was really an incredible guy. He was.
They called him the Pope. Well, do we call him the Pope of Voodoo, or I don't know whether he was called that. But
I mean, there was no structure, you guys, to create a pope. It wasn't that kind of religion. But he was called that in the media because he was the spokesperson for the religion, and he was incredibly charming, incredibly handsome.
And very bright as well, and could explain what it was all about. Can I just put this to you, Wade, because, time's a bit short. Bill and Hillary Clinton went on their honeymoon to the island of Haiti. They met Max Beauvoir, right? And then they go out to a ceremony, several minutes of rhythmic dancing to pounding drums. Bill Clinton recalled, and this is a quote from the President of the United States of America, "A man proceeded to rub a burning torch all over his body and walk on hot coals without his body being burnt. He didn't suffer any incisions on his flesh whatsoever." The woman he was with, in a frenzy, screamed repeatedly, then grabbed a live chicken and bit its head off in front of them. I mean, that's not a normal religion.
Well, actually, that's kind of like, criticizing the Catholic Church, because in Rome you can go to the Capuchin Mother Church and find the bones of 10,000 priests flayed on the, and arranged like applique and altars, which you can in fact do.
No, but this was live. I'm sorry, this is something that the President of the United States of America has described as happening in front of him. So I know exactly
what he saw, because Clinton was a big fan of my book, what's going on there is the handling of burning embers is because in a state of possession, where they believe that God has become them, what's really going on, what's really interesting is how the mind can affect the body that bears it when kind of sparked by a state of trance and serious devotion. I mean, I had the same experience, Mike. My first night in Haiti, I went to Max's place and I saw someone spinning on a fire. And it wasn't. I thought, is this some kind of trick? But I examined, and I'm a scientist, the PhD from Harvard. I examined the mouth of the people. There's actually a huge history around the world of people in religious trance, of devotion, being able to sort of endure pain with impunity. And the thing about the chicken is just this idea that, if you want to treat illness, you must make an offering to the earth, and the blood of the chicken becomes the offering. And this kind of idea of animal sacrifice really scares us and freaks us out. But the truth of the matter is, if you think of the Catholic Church, don't forget that the whole theory of what's called transubstantiation, which is a theory which the idea that the priest was empowered to transform the wine into wafer, not metaphorically.
But that now, Wade, has kind of gone into what you might call,
legend,
sort of legend and metaphor. Whereas
no, actually, that's not true. That's not true, you guys. In the Anglican Church, in the Church of England, it's considered to be a symbol at the Holy Communion. But if you listen to what the Catholic Church says, when you take Holy Communion in the Catholic service.
But what I'm saying is that if you take a communion in the Roman Catholic service, you don't actually think you're ingesting the body of Christ. I don't think anybody believes that. But in Voodoo, it hasn't sort of moved on to that level, has it? People are still very much entranced with the whole thing, and they believe in the spells and they believe in the healing and all of that.
Well, I think another way of thinking about it is that this is a religion that creates a worldview. It creates a society. So in the same sense that we talk about a Christian society or a Buddhist society, you can talk about a Voodoo society. And in that world, it's not really fair in a sense to pull out a few sensational elements.
But Wade, timing short. Can I just ask you this? Didn't the Duvalier family, both Papa Doc and Baby Doc, didn't they use voodoo as a weapon against the people? And they had that paramilitary mob, the Tonton Makute, who were always threatening to turn people into zombies. It was used like that, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't quite like that. What Duvalier did was he was saying, the father, he was a terrible man, but one thing he was saying is, what is our tradition? Is it African or is it European? And he was actually a much more complicated figure than history.
Yeah, but he was a bullying dictator who used the voodoo religion to terrify his population.
I think he did. Yeah. Wade, listen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We haven't got any more time, unfortunately. Wade Davies.
You see, it's very good a Wade to come on. A great guest and all that, but a complete apologist for something which everybody else regards as evil.
Well, I'm not sure whether it's evil. It may have some good parts to it.
It was used evilly. It was used evilly by the Duvalier family.
As indeed many religions have been. I was hoping he would tell us a bit more about the kind of the spells and all of that.
That's right. But he doesn't believe in all that.
He's so immersed in it.
He says it's a proper religion. Yeah. And yet, you find out, Mike, because I do the research on this, right? By the time the Duvalier family had given up destroying Haiti, half the population was starving. Yeah. Half of them had been murdered by the old Tontons. Half of them had fled the country. And it was all down to a policy by the Duvaliers of voodoo.
Yeah, and it is still a very poor country.
They said this is what the voodoo gods want. They want you to starve, want you to be buried alive, want you to be impaled on spikes and all this kind of stuff,
I know, it's quite a remarkable, situation.
But I seem to know more about it than our guest, Wade.
I'm not sure that you know more about it than he does, but
I think I do.
We'll be moving on from voodoo because we've got lots more to do.
I wonder if there's anybody in this world who's got a voodoo doll of me and sticks pins in it.
Do you think?
Because that might have happened to me during my lifetime. I tell you, I've had some strange experiences and things have happened to me which are completely inexplicable, and I wonder whether people have got into, nefarious religious practices.
Well, you've certainly upset plenty of people, and they could have done something like that.
I never mean to upset anybody.
Could have had spells cast upon you.
I just have to be straightforward about what's going on in life.
A bit more about superstitions coming up next on Talk Sport.
Talk Sport. On air, online and on TV at Sky Channel 0108.
I wanted to ask you about your last kind of performance, because you know how David Campese is one of the top rugby players that has ever played the game. And of course
I do. He's a big friend of mine.
I know he's a big friend of yours, and he's also been involved with some of the stuff that we're doing here at TalkSport around the Rugby World Cup. But I think it's right for me to tell the story, or to suggest that you tell the story of how when you were working with him in France, you didn't immediately recognise him, did you?
Well, I mean, I hadn't been like a schoolboy follower of rugby all my life, so it wasn't like...
Did you not play rugby then at school?
No, I didn't. No, we were a football school.
You played football, you played tennis, you played cricket.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
There were a couple of other things
Table
you did
tennis.
as well. Table tennis.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Bit of cycling.
Yeah,
but no rugby.
No rugby, no. No, now the point is, I mean, if I was covering the World Cup and Bobby Charlton was in the group of people I was working with, I would recognise Bobby Charlton immediately. Of course I would.
Right.
But what happened was, I got over there in France, full of energy and industry, rushing around, down to Marseille for one game, back up to Paris for another, off to Brest to cover a game there and all that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? And I was with this chap called Dave all the time.
So he was travelling with you?
Yeah, Dave was travelling with me. He was either on the train with me, or he was in the car with me, or on a plane with me, you know what I mean? We were getting around a bit and all that kind of stuff. It was really good. And
were you not ever on the air together?
Oh, yes, we were. Yeah.
So on the air, he was just known as Dave?
I just called him Dave. It was always Dave. You know, hi, Dave, hi, Mike, all that kind
and
of stuff.
And everybody else just referred to him as Dave?
Yeah, just referred to him as Dave,
right.
yeah. Honestly, no problem at all. You know, he was a very nice chap. And anyway, this
big
one...
Big guy, though, presumably, right?
No, not particularly.
No?
Not particularly big. No, some rugby players are not particularly big, like Brian Moore.
Yeah.
You know, Brian is not particularly tall.
He's not, no.
But a very solid man, obviously, international rugby player. But, no, it's when we got to the final in Paris, because remarkably, England was written off as no-hopers in that competition in 2007, but they got to the Stade de France final. And it was only when I was standing in the reception area in the Stade de France, like the media area, actually, that a guy from a newspaper from England walked up to me and said, hello, Mike, are you okay? I said, yeah. He said, can I have a word with him? I said, who? He said, you know, Dave. I said, Dave? Yeah. I said, yeah, sure.
Had it not occurred to you by the things he was saying and the kind of questions
Well, I knew he was an experieused rugby union player, and, you know, he talked a lot of common sense about the game and all that. So I knew. So I thought he was I actually thought he might have been I assumed he was an English rugby player, although he had an Antipodean accent.
An Australian accent, yeah.
Or mixed with, like, South African, because he subsequently went on to work in South Africa. But I thought, but hang on, a lot of, like, cricketers come from South Africa, and maybe a lot of rugby players come from sort of Australia or something, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I that was my thinking.
You weren't really paying attention, is what you're telling me.
Well, I was, but I was doing mostly the fans on the streets and all that kind of stuff, and the interpretation of what was going on inside the stadia and all that kind of stuff.
What did you talk to him about, like, when you were flying with him on the plane and stuff? Did you never have conversations about anything?
Yeah, about life in South Africa, life in Australia. We lived in South Africa then, worked in South Africa. And we, you know, we used to have a few drinks and talk about all sorts of things, you know, like he liked football, we used to talk about football a lot, and that kind of stuff. But it was when this guy, this journalist came up to me and said, wide-eyed he was, and said, can I have a word with him? I said, yeah, why not? You know, I thought, why he's interested in Dave. Yeah. But anyway, I then went upstairs and took my seat in the stadium to, about half an hour before the game.
Right.
And I started flicking through the final programme. And there was a list of the greatest ever rugby union players.
Right.
And, you know, I started at the back, number 20, anyway, got to number 3, and there was a picture of a bloke who I immediately recognised and thought...
That's Dave.
Well, I've seen him somewhere. You know, I'm sure I've seen him somewhere.
Right.
And at that very moment, Dave came up the aisleway to take his seat. And I thought, hang on, this is Dave. So when I looked at it, it said David Campese, the third greatest rugby player ever who's ever played the game, right? And then went on about, these fantastic tactics, the goose step.
Yeah.
You know, he was famous for the goose step, goose stepping and confusing the enemy.
Yeah.
A backward pass over his shoulder, which was revolutionary and had never been attempted before in rugby.
Right.
A record number of sort of tries and points and all this kind of
Various
stuff.
records broken.
Various records broken.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the most brilliant rugby players who'd ever put on a rugby shirt. So then I felt, well, I'm quite honoured then to have been in his company.
And to
you know
have
what I
become
mean?
such a good mate of his.
Problem was that was the last time I ever saw him because England lost the final. It was all over. Dave went off back to South Africa, and I haven't seen him since.
Have you never kept in touch then?
Well, yes, sort of.
He probably tells the story in reverse that I worked with this guy for like 3 weeks through the Rugby World Cup in France.
Yeah.
And he didn't actually know who I was.
I didn't actually.
Which is an extraordinary thing, really.
I have to admit, I had never heard of David Campese before the rugby started.
Yeah.
So even if somebody had said, even if I'd been somewhere where somebody had said, "Oh, hello, Mr. Campese," it wouldn't have registered with me, to be honest.
So you must not have ever watched an England-Australia game at any point during your, youth or growing up, or anything?
I probably did, but there's so many players on a rugby field, it's hard to remember all their names, really, isn't it? You know
That's
what I mean?
true,
yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll be swatting up all the names of the England players.
Yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, he was a very decent chap, and I have done interviews with him on the air since then.
Yeah.
And he's never said, it's you, Mike, the guy he didn't recognise, anything like that. He didn't seem to be bothered, to be honest.
No, sure, he's a very kind of self-effacing kind of bloke.
Exactly. And then with my World Cup programme, I sort of brought it home,
Yeah.
And then about, a few months later, I was in some family do or something. And, I said, I was away over the summer. I was doing the Rugby World Cup. And my nephew said, he said, Mike, I used to listen to you, Uncle Mike. I said, he said, you were with David Campese, weren't you? I said, I was, but I didn't realise it was David Campese until it was all over, He
must have been impressed.
Well, what he was most upset about was that I'd given him the World Cup final programme.
Right.
But he assumed that David Campese would have signed it across his picture.
Yeah.
And I forgot to ask him. And he said, I can't believe it. I can't believe that you travel around France with David Campese for 3 weeks and you haven't got a picture of yourself with him, you didn't get him to sign a programme. I said, well, I didn't know he was famous until last game.
Left.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
well, maybe
absolutely.
we should try and get him on.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
He'll probably be here in some capacity.
Oh, I'm sure he will be. I'm sure he will be. Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem at all.
Get his version of the story.
Exactly.
Now,
yeah.
a couple of tweets for you.
Okay.
Mad Max has tweeted at the two mics. He says, "Has Porky ever been to Haiti on a fact-finding mission like the guests? Topic for the quiz next week has to be voodoo."
Yeah, voodoo if you want. Yeah,
you haven't been there, have you?
No, but I studied the voodoo thing. You know, I mean, I seem to know more about it than he did because that guy was an apologist for something which was turned into a very, very cruel sort of mind-bending religion.
Well, here's what Francis has a view on it. He says, "Voodoo isn't evil; it's humans that are evil. Atrocities have been committed throughout history in the name of religion."
Yeah,
which I suppose is true, isn't it?
The voodoo cults during the time of old Papa Doc Duvalier and his son Baby Doc Duvalier convinced people that they'd have everlasting life if they ate mud. Because
mud,
because the economic policies of Haiti were so dreadful, much worse even than modern day Zimbabwe, right, where people starve.
Yeah.
But people were starving, so old Papa Doc Duvalier got his voodoo priests, and I don't know whether Max Beauvoir, the guy who's died, was one of them, to tell the population, don't worry, there's so many minerals in the soil in Haiti that all you've got to do is go out in your garden, scrape up a bit of soil, eat that, and you'll live forever.
And that wasn't a very convincing thing to do, was it?
No, exactly.
Here's one from Graham. He says, "Shocking Porky being disrespectful to his guests just because he has a different belief and view than him," he says.
Yeah. Well, no, it wasn't I have a different view. It's just that the guy, what was the name of the guest again?
His name was Wade.
Wade, yeah, Mr. Wade, is it?
Wade Davis.
Oh, Wade Davis, I see.
You can call him Mr. Wade if you want.
Mr. Wade, yeah.
Maybe you should have called him Mr. Wade.
Yeah. It's just that Wade is so...
well, he's a professor and he's also a scientist.
Yeah, but he's so brainwashed by, the actual... intricacy of what voodoo should be, that he couldn't actually tell us what it turned into be, what it turned out to be.
Well,
that it was used as a weapon of terror.
Yeah, I think maybe at one point, I don't know whether it still is. What we do know, as we said, though, is that it's a very, very poor country. It certainly hasn't been helped particularly by the use of voodoo, but there we are. It's all voodoo to me.
Yeah, it is. I mean, what I wanted to hear from old Wade was how he, in writing his book, went and seized back voodoo as a credible religion after the years of the Duvalier terror and dictatorship, which turned it into a weapon and did create, Mike, and I told you about this, I can tell you more about it, the Tonton Macoute paramilitaries, who were the most nasty, evil, uncivilised, inhumane bunch stalking the Caribbean for the last since Blackbeard the pirate was sailing around in his boat, the Black Death, hanging
the Black
people.
Death.
Yeah.
Was that the name of his boat?
That's the name of his boat.
You sure?
I'm certain. Hanging people from the yardarm and setting fire to them, so that when they sailed into ports where they were going to attack, people were so terrified they just fled because there was burning prisoners hung from the yardarm as he was sailing around the Caribbean.
Sounds a bit dangerous on a wooden boat.
He used to set fire to his own hair to prove how hard he was. Blackbeard.
Set fire to his own hair?
Yeah, he used to set fire to his own hair and then pretend it wasn't hurting him. Yeah.
Is that why his beard was black as well?
Well, I don't think it was, but that's what he used to do. Have you heard of
the news?
Have you heard of Calico?
Calico?
Yeah. He used to put that in his hair and set fire to it, so his head was like a flaming bush, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Some of the stuff you know.
Well, I do know a lot. I read a lot,
I know you do.
I study a lot of stuff.
Well, I hope you know a lot
I know all about the pirates of the Caribbean.
Just be quiet for a minute. Look at the time.
On digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM.
The Two Mics on Talk Sport.
Good morning, I'm Mike Graham, he's Mike Parry, you're listening to the Two Mics and we're keeping you entertained throughout the night. We might do a bit more of an exploration on Mr Parry's knowledge of pirates coming up in this hour, but his knowledge on the Battle of Britain will be tested a little bit later on because we're going to have the Battle of Britain quiz. That's the Porky quiz for this week, of course. We'll be bringing out a podcast a little bit later on and we'll be looking ahead to all the big Premier League matches coming up this weekend and we'll get more predictions out there for you. 08717 22 33 44. You're listening to the Two Mics with me, Mike Graham, and Mike Parry on Talk Sport. So So you're getting excited about the Rugby World Cup then?
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah. Well, I want England to win it.
You want England to win it?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure if they're going to win it, but it's always the time when it's a bit like Six Nations, isn't it? You actually start watching rugby.
Yes. Well, it's a bit like Wimbledon. I mean, you don't watch tennis any other time of the year, do you?
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, I watched a bit of the US Open. I watched a bit of the French Open.
Yeah, well, I did as well. Yeah, the finals and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but no, you're absolutely right.
You don't watch it in as much detail. You're not going to go to any of the games, are you?
No. No, I'm not going to go.
Are you sure?
Yes, certain, yeah.
Even if you get offered the chance to go to one?
Well, I probably don't have time, to be honest. There's other things to do. But I'll tell you what I do find odd, Mike. I'll tell you what I find odd.
Go on.
And this is not a criticism. Maybe it's because of logistics and all that.
Yeah.
But all I've been hearing on my car radio for about the last month is how many roads are going to be closed down because of the Rugby World Cup.
That's true, actually, yeah.
Now, I don't remember roads ever being closed down for major football competitions in this country.
Well, do you remember when the Olympics was on and they had that argument about the special lanes that were going to be used by the VIPs?
Like Parkway and all that kind of stuff.
No, but also the lanes that were going out to Stratford.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Some of the lanes were kind of closed off to regular traffic and ordinary cars.
Yeah, I do.
Because VIPs and athletes and everybody else were supposed to be using
it.
But actually, in the end, it caused less congestion because fewer people went out on the roads anyway. A lot of people went on holiday.
That's right, yeah.
And the traffic during the Olympics was no problem at all.
No, it was no problem at all. But you know where Twickenham is? I mean, it's on that road going out west. Yeah, but it's not actually in Twickenham. It's on the outskirts of Twickenham, isn't it?
Well, you head out sort of towards the M3, don't you?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And that road is a dual carriageway and a major artery in and out of London. And that's going to be closed whenever there's the day before and day after rugby games and all that kind of stuff.
Is it not just the day of the game?
It may be the day of the game, but that in itself is a terrible inconvenience to the people of London. Now, I'm not knocking it, but... I do... how do I explain this? Does rugby have a sense of superiority that does not exist in football?
Well, I don't think so. I mean,
does it? And for that reason, is it, of course we'll close the roads, it's rugby and all that kind of stuff.
Well, if there was a World Cup of football here, presumably that would be the same in around Wembley.
No,
they were playing games there, wouldn't it?
No, you never have to close the roads around Wembley. No, you don't, because of where it's strategically placed and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm saying is that... what we'll get now for the next month is, the sense of superiority that people who follow rugby have compared to football fans. Because football fans are regarded as scumbags by those who follow rugby.
Yeah, but that's changed, hasn't it, surely?
Well, I'm not sure it has. I mean,
when they had the Champions League final at Wembley, did they not close the roads off around Wembley for a few hours before the game and a few hours after the game?
No, definitely not. No.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm certain. Yeah, I'm certain.
And what about during Euro 96 when that was on?
No, definitely not. There were no roads closed then. That was the old stadium, obviously. Whereas when in Rome, when we went to the Champions League final in Rome, when United got beaten by Barcelona, that was the only time Messi headed a goal in a final, they closed all the roads off around the stadium, which led to me falling off that cliff.
Well, is it not something to do with as well that rugby stadiums, I mean, they're using some football stadiums, aren't they, as well, during the Rugby World Cup? And is it not the case maybe that Twickenham was, when it was put together, it was never really designed to do anything other than host England internationals?
That's true.
And so now that there's going to be this huge there's going to be corporate hospitality, there's going to be tented villages, it's going to be a massive thing.
Sure.
And it's great. I mean, it's great that England gets to host these things, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, I'm delighted it's here. It's great prestige for the country, and we'll do it very well because we do these sort of things well.
And presumably they're encouraging people to get there by means other than driving.
Yeah, well, I would think so, because there's a station in Twickenham, and then you come out the station, and then you walk across the... I think you walk across the pedestrian bridge over the road to the Stoop, which is where Harlequins play.
Right.
And that's where a lot of the corporate hospitality will take place, in the little stadium next door to Twickers,
Yeah.
Have you been to Twickers?
I have.
Yeah, I have as well.
Well,
Great
I told
stadium.
you, I think, that my former grammar school playing fields used to be in the shadow of Twickenham Stadium.
Oh, right, okay.
But they've now been sold many, many years ago.
Terrible.
And it's a car park.
Terrible. And the thing is that... what was I going to say?
I don't know.
It was the old Twickenham in those days, which was a dilapidated old wreck. The modern Twickenham is fantastic. Listen, talking about sport and all that, I came across some medical guy talking about the injury to, what's his name?
Luke Shaw.
No, the other guy at Arsenal.
Jack Wilshere.
Jack Wilshere.
Right.
And do you know what it said?
What did it say?
What it said is that Jack Wilshere may now be suffering the consequences of his very first injury that happened when he was 17 or 18. Because when you have one injury and it's serious and all that, your body then has to readjust itself to coping with that injury and put stresses and pressures on other parts of your body.
So not that it didn't heal properly, but just that he's compensated for it in a way which is now damaged the rest of it.
Absolutely. Psychologically, you think, is that ankle now weak because I've been out for 6 months and all that kind of stuff? And you start running a different way. And if you start running a different way, suddenly your hips are being used in a way
Yeah.
they haven't been used before.
Yeah.
Your knees are being asked to take pressures that they haven't been, and you suddenly develop an injury there. Now that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
makes
it
a lot
does.
of sense
Did
to
I
me.
ever tell you the story of my uncle, my dad's brother?
No,
he was a professional. He was a professional golfer.
I didn't know your dad had a brother.
Yeah, he had loads of brothers.
Was he as eccentric as your father?
Not quite as eccentric. He was the oldest. He
Okay.
came from one of those big families. He had one brother who became a professional golfer. He had one brother who disappeared during the Second World War. Wasn't killed, but kind of just disappeared. Came home.
What, missing in action?
Not missing in action. No, he was part of Air Sea Rescue or something like that, and he was working out in the Far East. And he came home at one point because he was on leave.
Yeah.
And then he went back out there, but then never came home. And the assumption was that he just kind of set up home out there and never got in touch with anybody ever again.
You're joking?
Yeah.
See,
Quite a mystery.
I said your father was a bit of a nut, and clearly
he's
it runs
not.
in the family.
Well, it's not that it runs in the
just
family.
disappear like
well, yeah,
that.
there was no explanation, and there was never a communication from the armed forces to say that he was missing in action or that he was lost or anything like that, because they knew that he, at the end of the war,
Wasn't a Glenn Miller situation?
He was. No, I don't think so. There was no missing
You know what happened
plane.
to Glenn Miller, don't you?
Well, the plane was crashed, didn't it?
No, it was bombed by a bomber.
Well, that's what you're saying.
No, I've researched it all. I know exactly what happened.
Right.
The bombers went out on a mission to bomb Germany, and the weather became increasingly fraught and bad as they got over there, so they aborted the mission.
Right.
But you can't land a Lancaster bomber fully laden with bombs.
So they had to ditch them.
Because you almost certainly will blow the plane up,
Yeah.
because the bombs were in those days were so unstable.
And also very heavy as well.
Very heavy indeed, and might have wrecked the plane on landing and all that kind of stuff. So they turned back and were told to ditch their bombs over the English Channel.
But isn't that just a theory, though?
No, because there's an eyewitness to the fact that a small plane was struck by the bombs being emptied out of the bomb bays of the Lancaster bombers, and the plane went down. There is actually a visual account of it, which only emerged about 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So, but is that generally accepted to have been the case then?
Well, it's what I think happened.
Well,
Not
that's what
everybody
you think
accepts
happened,
it.
yeah, because it's all sort of a bit of a mystery. Anyway, so he had this other brother who became a professional golfer, a very good golfer.
See, I didn't know that. Where was he a professional golfer?
He wasn't a professional golfer on the tour. He was
That's
a
what I
professional.
mean. He didn't end at the Open then.
No, he didn't. I think he might have played in one Open, but then he got married, and his wife didn't like the idea of him being a professional golfer on tour, so he became a professional golfer at a golf club. He was
Which
attached
one?
to a golf. I don't know. I can't remember.
It was in Scotland.
Somewhere in Scotland, yeah, somewhere near Glasgow.
And you don't even know the name of the club.
I can't remember it. No.
This is pathetic.
Why is it pathetic?
Well, it's a part of your great family history.
Well,
I mean,
but-
I know
yeah, but-
that my grandfather, was around when the first Mersey Tunnel was being built and helped partially to build it.
Did he?
And all these things, yeah.
Well, you don't know which part he partially helped to build, though, do you?
No, but I know that he was also worked at a fruit merchant called Poo Parts in Birkenhead on the dock there. When the ships came in from the Caribbean, bringing the bananas and all that, he was offloading them and selling them.
Okay. Well, this guy was a professional golfer attached to a golf
You
club.
know which golf club, though?
Well, I might
was
have
it
known.
Turnberry or...
No, it wasn't any of the big ones. There's millions of golf clubs in Scotland.
Yeah,
but it turned out that when he stopped being a professional golfer, because again his wife didn't like the idea that he was in a golf shop all day and teaching people to play
What
golf.
did she want him to do?
He ended up becoming a civil servant, which never really made him happy.
So he's
When
in
I-
the civil servant's office all day?
and when I met him, he was already a civil servant.
Yeah.
But it turned out that he developed quite bad back pain, and when he went to see the doctor about it turned out that one of his legs was shorter than the other.
Yeah, that happens to a lot
by
of people.
about an inch and a half.
So is one of mine.
One of yours is shorter than the other.
Absolutely.
So your 26.5 inch inside leg is only true for one leg.
Yes, the other leg is 27.5.
Are you sure it's not 25?
No, definitely not. No.
So how do you get trousers to fit you if you've got two legs?
Well, I don't. I have to have every pair of trousers I buy. I have to have altered.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that should probably cause you back pain, shouldn't it?
No, it doesn't cause me back pain
And
at
it
all.
should help you to make you walk funny.
No, it doesn't. No, I mean, considering the amount of walking I do, maybe I've sort of worn them down to the same length or something. I don't know, but
What, do you walk on one more than the other?
No, of course I don't. You fool! But what I'm saying is, my body is adjusted to that. Everybody has got one leg shorter than the other. It's just to what degree. In some humans it's 1/10 of an inch, and in some it's an inch, and in some it's 2 inches.
Yeah, well, his was quite substantial. It actually helped to make him a better golfer.
Well, it would do, because if you're leaning away from the ball and you've got one leg shorter than the other, if it's the back leg that's shorter, that's a distinct advantage.
Well, one leg is not behind the other. One leg is next to the other. It was because of the fact that you lean more to the left than you do to the right.
That's exactly what I mean.
It wasn't about leaning backwards.
Yeah. No.
I'm glad you've understood it.
I
But you
understand.
think that's Jack Wilshere's problem anyway?
Well, I was only reading the account that, on the internet somewhere, that some real top expert in sports injuries put up this theory that injuries like Jack Wilshere's can be the result of your previous injury and your body having to adjust now to settling into a different sort of mode of movement.
Right, well, he's certainly not going to be playing this weekend, and I'll be asking you what you think the score's going to be between Arsenal and Chelsea, amongst other things, and the Porky quiz coming up very shortly as well. This is Talk Sport.
Talk Sport. On air, online and on TV at Sky Channel 0108.
This is Talk Sport. We are the two mites. It's not far away now to the Porky Quiz, which is on the Battle of Britain. But we've been talking an awful lot about the Rugby World Cup. But also, of course, it's a massive weekend in the Premier League as well. I was saying to you, actually, I think last week, that we're almost an eighth of the way through the season already. And I know you might say, well, that's not very much. And, everything can change and Chelsea won't keep playing as badly as they have. And,
I think somebody pointed out that after this Chelsea-Arsenal game, they're sixth of the way through the season, and you can't recover the Premier League ambitions after that.
Well, I mean, Jose Mourinho doesn't seem to think that it's all over yet. So we're going to do our little Selco predictor game now.
Good idea.
As I said last week, you and I have got quite a big gulf between us. I think you caught up a little bit last week because you got a couple of decent predictions, particularly Everton beating Chelsea. Funnily enough,
United and Liverpool got right.
My sort of my instinct was to say that Everton would beat Chelsea, but I wouldn't go with it.
No, you weren't brave enough.
I couldn't quite convince myself that Chelsea were going to somehow lose.
You haven't got any bottle, that's your problem.
I've got lots of bottle. All right, well, let's do it
for the you know about the obvious ones.
Well, indeed. The game's coming up this week. The early game, earlier on Saturday, is Chelsea against Arsenal. That's Stamford Bridge. There's been so much said about this game now. Arsenal lost in midweek. Chelsea didn't in the Champions League. What's your prediction for this one?
I think there's trouble at Mill at Chelsea. You're talking about John Terry and Ivanovic now being unhappy and all this kind of stuff. So I'm going to go boldly for Chelsea 1, Arsenal 2.
Yeah, well, the thing is they've let in loads and loads of goals, haven't they? I think there'll be a lot of goals. I'm going to go for Chelsea 3, Arsenal 2.
Okay.
So I think Chelsea are going to win that. The next one up, of course, Aston Villa against West Brom. Your mate Tim Sherwood, you were a bit unkind to earlier in the week, weren't you?
No, I wasn't. No, I said that I thought he was overzealous in pumping up young Jack Grealish for just scoring a goal.
But it was his first goal for the club, wasn't it?
It may have been, but he took the boy's feet off the floor, literally, by lifting him up and waving him around. And Grealish's attitude to the rest of the game must have been skewed by that, in my view.
You think that kind of put him off then?
I think it put him off, and I think Villa had a terrible shock of a result because they were 2-0 up and they lost 3-2.
Right.
I don't think they will have recovered from that. I think West Brom are starting to look better. So, again, I'm going to go Aston Villa 1, West Brom 2.
But West Brom have not exactly had a great
No, they haven't,
start,
but I think they're picking up.
Yeah, do you think? I think it's going to be 1-1, that one. I'm going to go for a draw on that one. Next game is Bournemouth against Sunderland.
Yes.
Bournemouth playing okay, Sunderland not playing well at all.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a very narrow Bournemouth home victory, 2-1.
OK, I'm going to say Bournemouth 1, Sunderland 0.
Right,
so we both get the same kind of result there. Newcastle against Watford. Newcastle having a terrible time.
They're dreadful.
Steve McLaren, as we said earlier in the week, it's not exactly working any miracles there.
No. No, he's not. And again, I don't think he's going to be able to recover from this very, very poor start. I think they're doomed. And it's easier to win away from home than at home, statistics show. And that's why I'm being partial to away victories. Newcastle 1, Watford 3.
I've got Newcastle 1, Watford 2.
OK.
So we're going along the same kind of lines here.
Yeah.
Stoke against Leicester. At some point, presumably, Leicester are going to stop being on this fantastic run.
Well, you say that, and at some stage, you've got to say Stoke have got to pick up and start performing like they have done in the last couple of seasons under Mark Hughes. But I don't think it'll start this weekend. I think Leicester's confidence is sky high. So, again, I'm going away from home. Stoke 1, Leicester 2.
Yeah, well, I'm going like that as well. Stoke 0, Leicester 2.
Right.
Is what I think.
Yeah.
Coming up, it's Swansea against Everton.
Yes.
Now, obviously, you're not going to predict that Swansea are going to win this one, are you?
No, I'm not, because I think Swansea have been found out a little bit. I mean, I like Gary Monk, I think he's great, but I got the sense at the start of this season that he'd become a little bit overconfident in what he thought he could get out of his team, quite frankly. And I think there's been a correctional pattern at Swansea. So I'm going to go... And Everton had a marvellous result last week, starting to play like they know they can play. Swansea 1, Everton 3.
But what are they going to do about Naismith, though?
What about him?
I mean, is he going to start the game?
Well, if I was the Everton manager and I had a player who just scored a hat-trick after coming on as a substitute, I'd have to start him. So Lukaku might have to settle for the bench.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other way on this. I think Gary Monk's going to have a word with Swansea and he's going to get 3 points. I've got Swansea 2, Everton 1.
Yeah, but you see, that's a personal slight against me, isn't it?
Yes, you would say that. I think, no, it's just because they're going to be a little bit full of themselves, having beaten Chelsea, the champions, thinking that... But as I said to you at the start of the week, beating Chelsea the way they're playing at the moment is not actually a particularly incredible... Or the way they were playing that day, not a particularly incredible kind of feat. So I think they might be a little bit pumped up, a little bit full of themselves, and possibly pride comes before a fall. Now, coming up, Manchester City against West Ham.
Yeah. Right, OK. West Ham are brilliant away from home. They've also just got their first home victory. City can't keep on getting maximum points, so I'm going to go here for 2-2. Man City 2, West Ham 2.
Now, Crystal Palace couldn't get a draw out of them. I don't think West Ham will be able to do that either at home. And also, Pellegrini will be upset after what happened during the week.
That's the point.
So he'll want to make sure that they keep going. I'm going to go Manchester City 2, West Ham 0.
Right.
Now, Sunday, it's Tottenham against Crystal Palace. It'll be quite a good London derby, won't it?
Yeah, it will. But, you see, I have absolutely no faith in Tottenham's durability, so I'm going to go Tottenham 1, Crystal Palace 1.
Well, you saw Tottenham against Everton, didn't you? And you weren't impressed?
Not over-impressed, no. I wasn't over-impressed by either team, actually. It was a bit of a droll game, but I don't think Tottenham will beat Palace. I don't think Palace will get beaten. 1-1.
I think it's going to be Tottenham 0, Crystal Palace 2.
Oh, OK.
That's what I'm saying.
OK.
Liverpool against Norwich. Now, you'd have to say that Liverpool going off into the Europa League, playing on Sunday, surely they didn't sort of change the team in order to make sure they beat Norwich, did they?
Well, I think Premier points are very important to them, but I can't see Liverpool not bouncing back after that shocking defeat by West Ham. He can't possibly put out a team that's going to be as vulnerable. So I'm going to go Liverpool 2, Norwich 0.
Yeah, I think there's big problems with Liverpool. I'm going to say it's going to be 1-1.
Oh, OK.
And finally, it's Southampton against Manchester United.
Yes. That's going to be a 2-2 draw.
2-2 draw?
Yes.
Because Southampton haven't really been doing very much this season either, have they?
No, they haven't, but United do laboriously struggle to victories, you know?
They do. And now they've got Wayne Rooney injured, haven't they?
Yeah.
So we're not quite sure who they're going to play up front, really, to be honest. I'm going to go Southampton 1, Manchester United 1.
OK.
I think. So quite a preponderance of draws there.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, no, for me, mostly away victories. Now, what's this thing where we have to get double points?
Well,
what's
what
that?
you do, basically, we have got a mini-league going on, which we will put a link out if you want to play against us, because Porky's quite far down. I'm sort of somewhere in the middle, I think. But basically what you do is if you're certain about one particular result, then you can treble the number of points you get by sort of circling the sign on the left.
Well, I'm going to do that with the Swansea-Everton game, OK?
Oh, are you?
So I put a cross in the box?
You can do that, yeah.
Right, that's it.
And then when it's entered electronically, that'll be hit. And then there's another one that you can say you're least sure about.
Oh, least sure about.
And you put a cross in one of those boxes as well.
OK, well, that will be my Southampton United one then, OK?
OK.
So we'll put a cross in the other box.
All right.
Right, OK. There you go.
Excellent.
There, sorted. OK, I've cracked it. I say, got all the way through
I'm sure,
that.
rather like Chelsea starting badly, as you started badly, I mean, there surely must be some way of you clambering back up the top. I actually had a tweet from somebody earlier on today who said, you know, I'm actually lower down the 2 Mites Predictor League than Porky. Can life get any worse?
Yeah, well, probably not. But then again, you know, I have particular pressures on me which sometimes skew my ability to predict. OK.
Yeah, I know that is not the problem that you're facing this week though, because you've been very, very, very good. Now we've got lots more coming up. We've got the Porky quiz coming up very shortly.
Yeah, that's great.
On the Battle of Britain.
Yeah, that's good.
And here's one from Joe in Stoke who says, I think Blackbeard's ship was actually called the Queen Anne's Revenge. It wasn't called the Black Death at all.
That was one. He had more than one ship. Sometimes he would capture a ship and then use that for a year or two, putting his other ship in harbour somewhere to hide it from. You got to remember, he was hunted by the Royal Navy, and he couldn't sail around in the same ship all the time.
Well, Paul says it was called the Queen Anne's Revenge as well.
Yeah, one of them was. There's no doubt about that.
Not the Black Death.
No. Well, no. There's no doubt about that. Listen, I told you I was going to tell you. What I was going to say to you is, do you still read books?
Funnily enough, I don't read them that often, but I did take one with me on holiday. Because that's about the only chance I get to read it. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Do you have a book library at home, like a shelf with all books on it?
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of shelves with books on. Right. Have you not got?
Do you know how I went to somebody's house in the last couple of weeks, and sort of pompously had this sort of library, you know what I mean? And you go in...
Well, like a separate room?
Your separate room, yeah.
Oh, well, I haven't got that.
Well, it was his office, actually, to be honest, but it was office/library.
Well, I've got a lot of books, and I've got them all on bookshelves.
Yeah, I have as well. But actually, I've got piles of them on the floor now, because I've run out of bookshelf space, yeah. But what I was going to say is, this guy I'm talking about, I won't name him, you know.
No, don't name him.
He's kind of in our profession. He had all these books which, you know, if you had to say, here's a list of 80 books you've got to read before you die.
Yeah.
They were all there.
Right.
I mean, you know, like Stephen, what's his name, as A Brief History of Time.
Oh, yeah. Stephen Hawking,
Brief History of Time.
What else?
The Holy Bible.
The Holy Bible.
Yeah. The Hobbit.
Yeah.
All those other books about Middle-earth, you know. What are they called?
Well, you're Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, that's right. All that kind of
stuff.
stuff.
You haven't taken much of these titles in, really, have you?
No. But anyway, what I was saying is, he admitted he'd hardly read any of those books at all, but because his office was his workplace and people sometimes came to see him there, because he's like an author as well as a journalist, you know what I mean? He thought it was necessary to have all these books on his bookshelves so that people thought he was very well read.
That sounds like the sort of thing you would do.
Well, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't try to pretend that, because I am very well read, so I don't need to pretend, you see what I mean? But I thought it was pathetic, I really did.
Yeah. Well, loads of people are like that, aren't they? And I mean, a lot of times you get given books, you don't get a chance to... I mean, I've got loads of books I never actually got around to reading.
That's right. That's right. A lot of them were like Keynesian rubbish and all that kind of stuff, you know what I mean?
Keynesian.
Keynesian, yeah. That was a rubbish...
Economics.
Yeah, what did you think of Keynesian's economic theories?
I thought they were as good as any other economic theories. They're theories.
No, the rubbish, Mike.
All economic theories are rubbish.
No, the Keynesian economic theory is all about socialism, and it ruined the world economy in the 1920s.
Well, we haven't got time to discuss that now.
Well, I can discuss it with you, like.
Well, maybe we can have a quiz on it.
Do you know what it was? He was the guy, he was supposed to be the brilliant guy who came up with the theory that the state should control most of a nation's wealth. Utter nonsense. That's what Russia did. Look what happened to them.
Well, I don't think they followed his philosophy.
They did.
But that's another time for another conversation, because...
They called themselves civilised because they followed the rambling madness of an American economist.
Rambling madness.
Yeah.
Imagine that. It's time for the Porky Quiz.
Driven to the limit. Power steering.
Talk Sport.
This is Talk Sport. We are the two Mikes, and it is that time of the week. Some people call it the highlight of the week, of course, and it is the Porky Quiz. Earlier in the week, we saw the commemoration of the Battle of Britain.
Yes.
Lots of Spitfires in the air, and the whole Jeremy Corbyn business and all that.
Bandits at 9 o'clock.
Exactly. Now, you said that you were an expert on the Battle of Britain, so you wanted a quiz on it. Now, as per usual, the questions have been put together by independent quiz masters.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And
you've got two sets of questions, haven't you?
I've only got one set of questions.
Yeah, if I start getting them right, you transfer to the
I can't
harder
show you
set.
them because the answers are there as well.
Yeah,
but there is
of course you can't show
one
me
set
them.
of questions. As ever, if you get one right, you will hear this sound.
That's very long.
It is a bit
out.
long, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe a shorter version of that you'll hear if you get it right. If you get one wrong, you'll hear this.
That's a Stuka bomber going down.
Is that?
That's a Stuka bomber diving.
You can actually recognise the different sounds, can you?
It's the engine of a Stuka bomber.
Well, that's good. Sounds like you are an expert. Now, question number one. Are you ready?
Okay, yeah.
Who were the combatants of the Battle of Britain?
Hey?
The combatants, or the combatants, if you want to call them that.
Sorry, do you mean which two countries were fighting?
Who was fighting in the Battle of Britain, yeah.
The Battle of Britain was between the forces of Nazi Germany and the Royal Air Force and its associated squadrons from the Commonwealth, which was then the British Empire.
Well, are you saying that there's two countries then?
No, I'm telling you who the Battle of Britain was fought between.
OK. I'm looking for countries.
Well, I've just told you. The British Empire, right, and its associated countries, of which during the Battle of Britain there were 41, and the forces of Nazi Germany.
That's not correct.
And the territories they'd conquered in Europe.
That's not correct.
Well, I'm sorry, but it is correct.
I'll give you half a point. It's such an easy question if the answer is Germany and Britain, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I told you it was.
The correct answer is the UK, Canada, Germany, and the Kingdom of Italy.
That's rubbish.
It's not rubbish.
That is utter rubbish.
It's not rubbish.
I said Germany and its associated countries it conquered in
I'm giving you half a point.
And Canada is part of the British Empire.
I'm giving you half a point.
It was part of the British Empire, and therefore it was included when I said the British Empire.
But not every country had an air force.
I'm sorry, I said the British Empire. So what that meant is pilots came from India, captured pilots actually, from Poland, pilots came from Canada, pilots came from Singapore.
Yeah,
they came from all parts of the British Empire.
The only other country that had squadrons in the Battle of Britain was Canada. Apart from Britain.
Yeah, but I said the forces of the British Empire.
Well, yeah, but it's too broad.
No, it's not too
anyway,
broad.
We're never going to get there if you argue about this. I'll give you half a point. Question number 2.
Ludicrous. Yeah.
What was the name of Hitler's planned amphibious and airborne invasion of Britain?
Operation Sea Lion.
Correct.
Thank you.
Question number 3.
This has got maximum points so far. Yeah,
when did Winston Churchill call it their finest hour?
That was... October 1940.
At the end of the Battle of Britain?
Yes.
Incorrect.
No.
He said it in a House of Commons speech 3 weeks before it started.
What?
A very little-known fact. He made the speech 3 weeks before it started, when he called it their finest hour.
How could he have done that if they hadn't even fought the Battle of Britain?
And they will say that this was their finest hour.
See, that's a ridiculous trick question.
It's not a trick question.
Trick question.
Question number 4.
Never.
What was the name...
In the field of human conflict. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, that was later. Question number 4. What was the name of the RAF's main fighter plane?
Do you mean by number? Do you mean by speed, height?
I mean by number.
The number of kills?
The number of planes.
Hurricane.
Correct.
Thank you. This is getting good.
That's 2.5 out of 4.
Good. It's 3 out of 4. It should be 3.5 out of 4.
Question number 5.
Yes.
How many RAF squadrons took part?
In the Battle of Britain?
Yes. I'll give you sort of 5% either way.
OK. Number of squadrons that took part in the Battle of Britain. I'm thinking of Douglas Bader's squadron, which was 42. I would say... I would say 42.
42
yes.
is not quite close enough.
Right.
47.
Right. 47?
47.
Well, hang on, you said 5%.
Yes.
So that would have got me up to 45.
45,
so it's very close.
It's very close, yeah.
That's very close.
But not enough, I'm afraid. Question number 6. When did the Battle of Britain end?
October 1940.
That's good enough, I'll give you that.
Yeah, thank you.
31st of October 1940.
Yeah, exactly.
After 3 months and 3 weeks. Question number 7.
Yes.
Where is the Battle of Britain Memorial?
Battle of Britain Memorial is... I've got a feeling it might be at... No, I'm just thinking aloud here, thinking aloud. It might be at Hendon, or it might be at Biggin Hill, or it might be at the Battle of Britain Memorial. I think that's at... it's not at Duxford, is it? No. I think it's at Hendon.
Incorrect.
Oh. Where is it?
It's in Kent, actually, at a place called Capel Le Fern.
Is that near Biggin Hill?
Well, it's in Kent.
Well, Biggin Hill's in Kent.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I should have said Biggin Hill.
Yeah, maybe you should have done.
Yeah.
But that's incorrect. So you've still got 3.5 out of 7. Question number 8.
Yes.
Can you name 4 stars of the 1969 film Battle of Britain?
Oh, blimey.
You must have seen it.
I saw Reach for the Sky. That had Kenneth Moore in it.
Well,
now, you see, this is not a question about the Battle of Britain. This is a question about a film.
Well, it's a question
no,
about
it's not.
the
No,
film
this
of
is
the Battle of
ludicrous.
Britain.
4 stars of the Battle of Britain film.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I could...
Give half a point if you get 2.
Now, let me think. Todd? No, he was in the Dam Busters.
Todd?
You know, Richard Todd.
No.
Richard Todd. Now, I'm only thinking aloud.
Oh, okay.
Richard Todd. Who's that guy, Stanley somebody or other? Stanley... You know the guy I'm talking about?
Stanley Baxter.
No, he was a comedian, you idiot. Let me just think. Right. The Battle of Britain.
The Battle of Britain,
1969.
Film, 1969. Yes.
Right. I'm thinking of actors from that era, and actors from that era were Stanley... I'll tell you what he was in. He was in Zulu with Michael Caine. What was his name?
Well, I can't give
thinking
his name,
aloud,
can
thinking
I?
aloud, thinking aloud. Hang on. There was him. Then there was
Stanley. What's his name?
No, hang on. I'm trying to think who would be around in those days. Oh, I know. I bet you Michael Caine was. No, I don't think Michael Caine was in that. I don't remember seeing him as a fighter pilot. Right. I'm trying to think of people running across the field and jumping into a Spitfire. Who was around? Let me see. What about? Yeah. You see, I don't think Richard Burton was in it. I'm sure Richard Burton wasn't in it. So
give me a lot of names of people who weren't in it.
Yeah. Okay. Stanley. No, it wasn't Baxter. Right. Okay. I don't know because this is. I'm not answering questions about films.
All right. Well, you could have had Laurence Olivier. You could have had Trevor Howard. You could have had Robert Shaw. You could have had Kenneth Moore. You could have
Kenneth Moore. I said Kenneth Moore.
No, you didn't. You said he was in Reach for the Sky.
Yeah, but I didn't say he wasn't in the Battle of Britain.
You said, well, you didn't say he was. You could have had Michael Caine. You could have had Christopher
I said Michael
Plummer.
Caine.
You said he wasn't in
I said Michael Caine.
You could have had Ralph Richardson.
I said Michael Caine.
Edward Fox.
That's two.
Michael Redgrave.
Yeah, well, I thought Edward Fox, but I didn't want to say it because I thought I was confusing him with the Day of the Jackal.
Yeah, I know. It's terrible.
But this is
Neil
not.
Poir.
This is not a quiz on films.
Neil Poir for that.
It's not a quiz on films.
Okay, back to the Battle of Britain. Question number 9.
Yeah.
How many aircraft took part?
In what?
In the Battle of Britain.
Aircraft.
Yeah, total.
In total. On both sides.
Yeah, in total.
In total.
On all 4 sides.
6,000.
The correct answer is 4,513.
No, I don't think that's right.
It is right.
No, I don't think that's right.
1,963 Allied, 2,550 German.
No, you haven't taken into account planes that were bombed on the ground.
I've taken into account how many aircraft took part.
No,
Question
that's
number
wrong.
10.
That's wrong, yeah.
Can you say how many casualties there were on the RAF side?
In the Battle of Britain?
Yes. It's a Battle of Britain quiz.
Yeah. We lost 1 in 6 pilots, which totalled about 514.
That's not bad. 544.
Well, there you go.
I'm tempted to give you that.
Yeah, right, thank you.
422 injured.
Yes.
That means you have a grand total of 4.5.
Well,
out of
that's
10.
nearly 5. That's nearly 50%. And in fact, I claim 50% because
you can't claim 50%.
No, I got the first question absolutely right. You only gave me half a point.
You got 4.5. I
and
said
by
you'd
the
get
way,
4.
it's out of 9 because I will not accept a question about a film in a subject as serious as the Battle of Britain. Okay, particularly in Battle of Britain
It's
week.
a film about the Battle of Britain.
So that's 5 out of 9. So what's 5/9 of 100? That's about
What? That's a percentage.
That's about 57%.
Do you think?
That's my highest ever mark.
Yeah, well, it's not actually because it's only 45%. That's what you've got. 4.5 out of 10. Well done. We'll have another Porky quiz, of course, same time next week.
Indeed.
We got some more stuff coming up next, though.
I thought it was brilliant, actually. Don't you know it was brilliant?
I thought you did quite well.
Even those ones that I didn't get absolutely right, I was very, very close to.
You were there or thereabouts.
The only one that I was completely skewed on was a film question. Once again, you gerrymandered it. I don't want questions about films in future.
Really?
No.
Maybe you should just write your own questions.
Yeah, well, maybe I should, yeah. Be better than yours.
That might be better. They're not my questions. I have nothing to do with them. We are the Two Mikes.